Chapter 287. The bloody light in the forest gradually dissipated, and the bloody rain turned into steaming smoke. The students who ran out of the third dormitory building looked in the direction of the forest in a daze. Some of them even suspected that they were in a dream. The horrifying flesh giant turned into ashes in the light, and the huge skeleton that defeated it was no longer there. Under the dark night, the remnants of the curse power drifted with the wind, dotting the forest like a dream. If it weren't for the fact that some people still had headaches, and the unconscious students had yet to wake up, perhaps everyone would have thought that the previous situation was an illusion. Among the confused crowd, only the girl with long black hair behind the broken window and the members of the consultation department who rushed over knew the details. The excited voices of the teenagers echoed in her ears. Murdy looked at the place where the huge skeleton disappeared, and tears of joy burst out of her eyes. Although the process was difficult, justice eventually defeated evil. The shining fist of Gulandair was like a ray of hope, releasing the depressed members of the consultation department and Murdy. In the forest, Luoya slowly approached Matthew, who had fallen to the ground. At this time, the middle-aged man was badly mutilated, and his teacher's robe had turned into rags. The exposed organs in his cut-open chest were still struggling and beating, and the ends of the broken blood vessels occasionally spurted out blood. Luoya looked at the heinous villain and frowned. Although Matthew was not dead, more than half of his vitality had been consumed in the sacrifice, and he might not survive the night. Seeing Luoya coming, the cultist, whose face was devoid of skin, weakly cried for help. "Save me, save me!" Matthew struggled with all his might, and his eyes were filled with the fear of death. However, Luoya was unmoved, and her expression did not even change. Treating the cultist was purely out of her mind. It was probably the stupidest thing that she could do. After all, once the cultist regained his breath, he could sacrifice or use the secret technique again in minutes. He might even be able to kill the cultist. "Do you think I'm a good guy?" I have information. "I'll tell you the information." "Information?" Luoya raised her eyebrows when she heard Matthew's words. The middle-aged man struggled for a moment and hurriedly said, "Do you think killing me will end this? Our blood sacrifice church is just a small organization. We are nothing in the eyes of those big guys. They are planning something big. Just like 400 years ago. Ugh. Go on, hey. Matthews?" Luoya narrowed his eyes at the sudden interruption of the middle-aged man's words. But before he could get closer, Matthew's body suddenly began to inflate like a balloon. The next moment, black flames erupted from the depths of his body, enveloping him in a flash. "Ah! Matthew!" Luoya suddenly took a step forward, but it was too late. Matthew screamed in front of him, twitched slightly, and then died completely. His dying body quickly turned into a pile of bones in a few seconds. He was dead. Matthews died just like that. Luoya stared at the pile of smoking charred bones in front of him. His eyes widened in disbelief. As a heinous cultist, Matthew's death was not to be regretted, but he should have died after receiving a fair trial, or after confessing information about other hidden cultists, rather than in this situation. Damn it! Matthew, who was about to become a witness, had died. This made the black-haired young man furious. It was obvious that he had been silenced without even knowing that he had been tampered with. It should be Matthew's words that triggered this spell, but can't you say it faster? At the very least, he should finish his sentence. 400 years ago is just a point in time. What can I know? Even if I say one more word, Luoya gripped his cane angrily, but there was nothing he could do. He stared at Matthew's bones for a long time with a gloomy face, but in the end, he could only give up. Half an hour later, a black-haired teenager stepped down from the carriage at Forster Station. It was Luoya who had just dealt with Matthew's side. After returning to the third dormitory area and confirming that Melty was safe and had been protected by the members of the consultation department, Luoya immediately rushed to the other side of the battlefield. Now that their leader was exposed and dead, it was basically impossible for the cultists to have any reinforcements, but even so, Luoya was still a little worried. Matthew's self-sacrifice was still in front of him. The cultists could play too many tricks. Paul and others were still inexperienced. Death may be avoided, but there might be serious injuries. Luoya was here to extend people's lives. With the help of the Holy One's dagger and Pei Tila, he could deal with the injuries caused by the cultists in an emergency. Of course, another reason was that Matthew's words before he died made Luoya faintly uneasy. Perhaps there was something deeper that was hard to discover spying on the city and the academy. It must be an organization that was far more powerful than the blood sacrifice church. Regardless, now that he had learned of this, he had to discuss it with Lillian. Chapter 288. This is it, right? That hell on earth. Recalling the human test site described in the original work that brought a strong impact to everyone, Luoya's heart was as heavy as lead for a while. He also understood why the current situation was so weird. These security department soldiers did not cry because of casualties, and Paul and the others were not weak people who would vomit for half an hour just because of a smooth battle. They should have already gone back and forth down there. The physical disgust for these crimes and cultists, and the sympathy for the seniors who were killed, these feelings were tangled together, making these relatively pure and kind-hearted students feel terrible. Luoya gritted his teeth, and the hatred for the cultists in his heart soared again. He walked to the wall and patted Paul's back. The two completed the information exchange in the sound of vomiting. According to Paul, when the twin stones lit up, the action team was divided into two teams and attacked from both sides. As a result, Paul's side was luckier as they met the blood sacrifice church who were preparing to evacuate. It turned out that as Luoya and others expected, the blood sacrifice church also had the means of long-distance signal transmission like the action team. The two teams met at the gate of the manor. Paul and Gerlach, who remembered Luoya's order, did not say anything. They immediately launched a set of attacks and fired the first shot of the battle. However, unlike the fast combat of ordinary Transcended, the third-year security department action team was well-trained, far beyond the expectations of Paul and others. They did not adopt close combat, but they used bows and curses to restrain the enemy. At the same time, they fired curse signal flares to call for reinforcements. This set of tactics could be said to be the biggest reason why they only had light injuries in this battle. It turned out that the tactics of the security department played a great role. The Blood Sacrifice Church launched sacrificial witchcraft several times during the battle, turning some members into bloody monsters. At one point, they posed a serious threat to the action team. However, with the advantage of numbers and strength, Paul and others successfully held on until the arrival of Lillian's team. The next situation was very simple. Under Lillian's leadership, the team pushed forward all the way. Of the 28 cultists, 3 were arrested, and the rest were all killed on the spot. No, I saw it. Moreover, it's a strengthened version of the tentacle's mouth. The smell is much stronger than yours. After listening to Paul's description, Luoya raised his eyebrows and did not speak. He looked around and found that Lillian was not nearby. He then turned to ask Paul. After hearing Luoya's question, the latter looked unnatural. Royal sister, she didn't come out after going in. She even ordered everyone to leave. Paul looked at the entrance of the cellar with blood flowing like a monster's mouth and said with an ugly expression. The nearby security department students looked worried when they heard this. Luoya was stunned for a moment before he suddenly recovered and stared at the cellar with his eyes wide open. That's right, Lillian should be the one who suffered the greatest impact in this cellar. Luoya, who suddenly remembered some plots in the game, frowned. He looked at Paul, who was worried but didn't take any action. After thinking for a moment, he stepped forward. Brother Luoya. What are you? Senior Lillian said that you're not allowed to enter, but she didn't say that I'm not allowed to enter. The black-haired young man endured the pungent smell of blood and walked to the entrance of the cellar. He then turned back and said faintly, "I'll go and bring her out." Luo Ye had always felt that even among transcended, his sanity value was extremely high. This was mainly related to his experience. Putting his previous life aside, in this life, Luo Ye encountered a perverted murderer of a cult at the age of 9. The paintings drawn with human flesh and blood were extremely strange, far surpassing any horror movie. After that, after experiencing the mountain of corpses and the sea of blood in the holy capital and the horrifying alien race in the sea, Luo Ye's will could be said to have been tempered thousands of times. Ugh! However, this did not stop him from retching not long after he came down. Yes, facing the road formed by blood mixed with mud, Luo Ye's will was not defeated, but his taste system couldn't stand it anymore. He began to feel nauseous physiologically. After casting 2 curses on himself to resist the bloody storm a little, Luo Ye walked all the way down to the depths of the cellar while recalling the plot here in the game. In the game, Recorder's Eye, Luo Ye remembered that this hell on earth had a great impact on Lillian. The reason was not that Lillian was too fragile, but that Lillian's body sense was very different from others. When Luo Ye and the others saw these disfigured and mutilated victims, at most, they couldn't accept it and couldn't bear to look directly at them. They didn't know who they were, but Lillian was different. She knew some of the victims. In the game, Lillian had nightmares for a week because of this incident. It wasn't until Paul's visit that the knot in her heart was untied. Unfortunately, the world had changed. In reality, the relationship between Paul and her was far less close than in the game. Now that Lillian was at the scene, her reaction was probably far more intense than having nightmares. Stepping on the wet and disgusting road under his feet, Luo Ye walked through the uninhabited test site with a heavy heart. The young man frowned and walked to the end of the cellar. He finally found Lillian in a room similar to a cell. Chapter 289. In the cellar, the black-haired girl who heard the call snapped out of her daze. She realized that Luo Ye had appeared beside her without her noticing. At this moment, Luo Ye was covered in dust. His coat was still stained with blood and dust after the battle. However, unlike his clothes, the black-haired young man had a firm and powerful expression. His golden pupils shone in the dark cellar, gentle and calm. When she met his gaze, Lillian seemed to have forgotten about the bloody hell she was in. She forgot about the indescribable pain and unhappiness she felt. An inexplicable sense of intimacy shone in her heart like a beam of light, snapping her out of her daze. However, it was also because of this that Lillian suddenly felt an unbearable sense of shame. As an elder who had always been worried about Luo Ye, she didn't want to show it. She had an inexplicable feeling of not wanting the young man to see her unrecognizable self. "Don't look at me. Get out." Her hoarse voice issued a strict order. This was the first time Lillian had spoken to Luo Ye in such a tone since they met. Her words were strong on the outside but weak on the inside, implying that she was imploring him. Unfortunately, Luo Ye couldn't comply. "I'm sorry, senior sister. We're of the same rank. You can't order me around. You. Let go. Let go of me." Looking at the girl who kept struggling to retract her arm while crying with her head lowered, Luo Ye's face twitched. He was filled with regret. He didn't expect that senior sister's condition would be so serious. She probably saw an illusion when she tried to touch the corpse earlier. Thinking of this, the young man steeled his resolve. He thought for a moment and reported the news to the panicking girl. "Senior sister, Miss Murdy is safe. The Blood Sacrifice Church's bishop died after he was defeated by me while escaping." The black-haired young man softly reported the situation on his side. The sudden news successfully diverted part of Lillian's attention, causing the girl to stop struggling. Seeing this, Luo Ye continued. "The matters outside are almost done. I'll report to the academy tomorrow morning. This incident will be considered over. Senior sister, can you not stay here any longer? Everyone outside is worried about you." Under Luo Ye's soft persuasion, Lillian's expression finally softened. However, the corpse of her friend beside her seemed to blame her silently. The young lady turned her head and was about to look again when Luoya stepped forward and blocked her view. Luoya felt like a nightmare to see someone she once knew turn into a badly mutilated corpse. The scariest part was that Lillian was also the head of the security department. This could be said to be the biggest knot in Luoya's heart. But after careful consideration, Luoya came up with a countermeasure. Luoya. Senior sister, don't look anymore. Don't tell me you think it's your fault. Of course, I'm the head of the security department. If I had discovered this earlier, stop joking. What does this have to do with you? Luoya frowned and asked angrily. The blood sacrifice church has existed here for at least 10 years. How many ministers of the Ministry of Security have there been in the past 10 years? Senior sister, do you think they're all guilty? The leader of this cult, Matthew, is a teacher. He knows the movement patterns of the Ministry of Security like the back of his hand. It's impossible to discover them through normal means. Senior sister, are you able to predict the future and solve this problem? And most importantly, although the victims are our seniors, strictly speaking, they're outsiders after graduation. The Ministry of Security is the department responsible for the safety of all students. They're not under their jurisdiction at all. Moreover, none of the students in the school were harmed. Senior sister, are you going to deny the hard work of the Ministry of Security? No, of course not. But Luoya's question made the young lady hurriedly deny it. However, the pain in her heart couldn't be easily eliminated. Luoya looked at Lillian and couldn't help but feel sorry for her. After a month of interaction, Lillian might have understood Luoya, but Luoya also understood her. Although Lillian had a cold personality, she wasn't emotionless. It could be said that Lillian attached great importance to friendship and familial ties, far more than anything else. This was also the reason why the Austin Empire had been able to maintain a balance of power. Her two elder brothers were unable to surpass level 3 of the source rank and had no advantage other than their age. If Lillian really didn't care about their brotherhood, it wouldn't be difficult for her to get rid of them with her innate talent and powerful backing. However, she had never thought of doing so, even though she knew that they hated her to the core. She didn't fight for it, not because she couldn't, but because she didn't want to. Lillian's gentleness was silent and difficult to capture. Luoya, who had experienced it during the remedial classes, couldn't be clearer. Chapter 290. The moment the bloodline resonance appeared, both Lillian and Luoya's minds went blank. Neither of them expected such a thing to happen, but the next moment, that feeling of perfect harmony instantly occupied their hearts. Before their subjective thoughts were reflected, the bloodline resonance was already using its own method to promote their choice. If a person's happiness and sadness were affected to a certain extent by hormones, then the bloodline's influence was an indescribable yet irresistible sense of intimacy. Although this surging resonance was only for a short moment, it completely changed Luoya and Lillian's understanding of each other and also solved many mysteries in Lillian's heart. So that's how it is. The purple-eyed girl widened her eyes. She finally understood why she had been acting so strange recently. No matter if it was the natural concern or the uncontrollable pity, it wasn't without reason. The power of being a blood relative had already unknowingly influenced Lillian. Although there was no resonance, every time her and Luoya's spell powers clashed and overlapped, subtle changes would occur. Actually, now that she thought about it, many things were already quite obvious. They were both of the same creation element and the same spell powers. With all these coincidences overlapping, the only explanation was that they weren't coincidences. However, the huge difference in her living environment made Lillian ignore all of this. And when the truth arrived, it brought her a huge surprise. If one were to trace the origins of the Ackerman family and the Akot family, it had been at least 1,000 years since they met. Lillian viewed this bloodline relationship that spanned countless years as a treasure that Shia had bestowed upon her. A bloodline family. A relationship that she couldn't betray, couldn't hate, and absolutely couldn't be severed. These words spread in Lillian's heart like a hot current. At the same time, Luo Ye's mind was in chaos. Lillian was his bloodline relative. How was this possible? Disregarding everything else, if this relationship was discovered, Lillian's situation would be, Luo Ye, we are, senior sister. The black-haired boy looked at the girl who was so agitated that she couldn't speak. He was about to speak when he suddenly felt an uncontrollable spell power rapidly erupting in his body. At the same time, Luo Ye's black rose ring glowed as if it was resonating with the spell power. Not good. Senior sister, get away from me. Luo Ye, who had already experienced this situation twice, instantly paled and pushed the girl away. Under Lillian's astonished gaze, the torrent of curse power erupted with an unstoppable force. Before he could speak, Luo Ye's vision turned black, and he lost consciousness. When the black-haired young man opened his eyes again, he was greeted by a starless night sky. He could hear the crackling of flames on wood, and the thick smell of blood filled his nostrils. The cold ground and the night wind made him shiver. Where am I? Luo Ye's hazy brain slowly turned in the darkness, thinking about the current situation and everything that had happened before. The blood envelope incident, the dark space when he was guarding, the explosion of blood when he defeated the cultists, and the scenes of the night before he lost consciousness flashed across the young man's mind. Finally, it came to a tear-stained face that couldn't contain its joy. The moment he thought of Lillian, Luo Ye finally woke up completely. He sat up with his palms on the ground and called out. Senior sister. His hurried voice echoed in the night, but unfortunately, there was no response. Luo Ye panted under the light of the fire and quickly realized his condition. It must be a fragment of history, but why did it have to happen at that time? Thinking of the situation at that time, Luo Ye was anxious. He quickly looked around with the help of the fire, and when he found that Lillian wasn't nearby, his mind went blank. No one. What's going on? Is it because I pushed senior sister away? No, that's impossible. After all, I pushed her away to interrupt the activation of the King's Blood ability. If I didn't succeed, the chances of senior sister not being involved, recalling the last time Xia Luot was pulled into a fragment of history even though they were sleeping in the same room, Luo Ye's heart couldn't help but sink. He held his forehead and forced himself to calm down. Right now, there were only two possibilities. The first was that senior sister didn't come in. Luo Ye really wanted to set off firecrackers to celebrate. No one knew the dangers of a fragment of history better than Luo Ye. Most of the time, it was unreasonable. For example, if he encountered Mr. Darkness, without a Mother Earth like Pei Tila, no matter how strong he was, he would probably die. Luo Ye had just reunited with this blood relative of his, and the indescribable feelings in his chest still lingered. No matter what, he couldn't accept that Lillian's life was in danger. If possible, he was even willing to sacrifice some of his life in exchange for Lillian's safety. But he had to admit that reality wasn't affected by one's emotions. After a rational analysis, Luo Ye felt that this possibility was a little low. Chapter 291. Saint Heroes Society. Saint Envoy. On the side of the road, Luo Ye stared at the first line of the letter with the help of the firelight. His golden pupils constricted in disbelief, and he suddenly turned around to look at the pile of corpses behind him. They're from the Saint Heroes Society. The Saint Heroes Society is undoubtedly a cult, but the cultists are also cultists. So, it seems like this is a double cross. The black-haired boy blinked. He did not expect to find a group of dead enemies. The Saint Heroes Society, this name was deeply etched in Luo Ye's memory. During the Civil War of the Golden Fleet, Luo Ye had a close relationship with the director of the Saint Heroes Society, Daoj Leisai. He even chased after him and made the young level 2 source puppet master break down. Of course, because Daoj Leisai almost succeeded in killing Xia Luot, Luo Ye was still angry even if he was turned into thousands of pieces of frozen meat. After returning, Luoya also asked about the situation of the Noah Ire organization. After some investigation, Miss Angel told him that the Saint Heroes Society's activities in the theocracy had been suspended for many years. This news made Luoya relieved, but even so, the boy was still very concerned about this sect that believed in the Mother Goddess. After all, the 6 disasters were related to the survival of the human community, and he could not afford to underestimate the enemy. He did not expect to meet them here. After reading the letter, Luoya first determined the current time, 612 of the Third Era, which was almost 400 years away from the era Luoya lived in. The location was also very clear, near the scholar's country, Leinster. This era should be the time of the Second War of the Mutants. As for Leinster, it seems that there was a turmoil, the boy muttered to himself as he recalled the background of the era. At the same time, he tried his best to think about the content of the scholar's country, but he found that there were quite few impressions. As a huge disaster that threatened the entire human world, the main theme of this era was undoubtedly the Second War of the Mutants. Most of the writers of history were used to describe this long and drawn-out war, to record the tenacious and unyielding spirit of mankind, and to write a heroic story that could be both praised and wept. Luoya wouldn't be able to finish talking about all these in a day. However, as for the scholar country, there really wasn't any record of it. In the end, it was still too long ago. 800 years was enough to bury a country like the Sophia dynasty in history. Leinster from 400 years ago was not even worth mentioning compared to the front line that was rolling in the blood of the aliens. Luoya only remembered that there was a book that said there was a turmoil caused by the cultists in the Kingdom of Scholars, and this was also confirmed by this letter. The sender of the letter was Bradley, the president of the Leinster branch of the Saint Heroes Guild. The content of the letter was very simple. It was a plea for help. Currently, there was indeed a cult riot in Leinster City, which was probably caused by the deployment of too many human elites to the front line. Unfortunately, the main character of this riot was not the Saint Heroes Society, but the Brotherhood of Redemption. The relationship between cults was probably a blind spot for many people. Laymen often thought that jackals of the same tribe would inevitably collude with each other, but in fact, this was completely wrong. Different cults had different goals. For example, the Saint Heroes Society was a cult that longed for the 6 disasters, to purify the world and lead everyone to return to Mother Goddess. Strictly speaking, its purpose was to destroy human civilization. Luoya didn't know the purpose of the Brotherhood of Redemption, but one thing was certain, they didn't believe in Mother Goddess, so they probably didn't like the 6 disasters. And even if the Brotherhood of Redemption was also a group of idiots who wanted to destroy the world, they would never cooperate because they did not believe in the same God. They would be considered heathens if they did not believe in the same God. Once the heathens achieved their goal, even if the result was the same, they would still lose. Therefore, although they were all evil, they would never pee in the same pot. And now, the situation in Leinster had proven this point with facts. According to the letter, the Brotherhood of Redemption had almost completely occupied Leinster with the help of a sacred relic. The defenders and the surviving residents of the city had retreated to St. Freya's College and activated the defense mechanism of the city within the city. The Brotherhood of Redemption saw this and temporarily changed their target, killing the cultists in the city who disobeyed their leadership. The Saint Heroes Society was the first to bear the brunt and suffered heavy losses. As an old cult, the Saint Heroes Society also had their own trump card, but it seemed that only the Sacred Envoy could activate it. This was also the reason why they sent an urgent letter to the Sacred Envoy. But unfortunately, the Saint Heroes Society couldn't wait for their Sacred Envoy because after confirmation, Luoya found that the so-called Sacred Envoy was the dead young man. There's no saving him. Goodbye. After reading the entire letter, Luoya had a basic understanding of the current situation in Leinster City. He was happy to see this dog-eat-dog situation, but at the same time, a choice appeared in front of him, and that was to enter the city or not. It was obvious that compared to the complicated situation in Leinster City, where all parties were fighting, the wilderness was much safer despite its hardships. Just hide in the woods for half a month, and at the very least, they could keep their lives. That's right. Luoya was actually unwilling to get involved in this mess. After all, he was not in a good state now. This time, the timing of entering the historical fragment was too bad. Unlike the previous 2 times when he was full of energy, Luoya had just defeated Matthew, who sacrificed himself. In the process, he overdrew his vitality and used the touch of frozen earth. Although the extent was very light compared to the past, the side effects were still there. After entering the city, no matter if he encountered the Saint Heroes Society or the Brotherhood of Redemption, it was basically unavoidable to fight. The only one he could rely on was the academy, which was the weakest. To get there, he would have to pass through a large area occupied by the enemy. And most importantly, even if he arrived, Luoya, who had no identity in this era, should not be able to enter. In the war against the cult, it was common sense to never let a traitor sneak in even if there was a shortage of people. Not entering the city was undoubtedly the safest situation, but on the other hand, there were also many problems. First of all, naturally, there was the system's evaluation and harvest. Although the historical fragment was unusually dangerous, it would bring a huge leap in Luoya's strength every time. This was without a doubt. Not entering the city was equivalent to giving up this precious opportunity. On the other hand, it was the 612th year of the Second Era. At this time, the Dusk Sage Society should not have disappeared yet. The scholar should be in the academy, and there was nothing better than seeing the scholar in person to solve the mystery. Chapter 292. Leinster City was done for. This was the most intuitive thought of the Leinster City branch president and bishop of the Saint Heroes Society, Bradley Dennis, a grey-haired, middle-aged man. It had been nearly a week since the Brotherhood of Redemption started their rebellion. In this week, Bradley's mood had almost gone through a roller coaster ride, and he had not recovered from it until now. After the war with the aliens began, the elite forces of Leinster City were constantly drawn away. With the reduction of teachers, the number of students from various countries plummeted, and the Holy See's personnel were constantly transferred to the front line. The darkness in the city began to stir. Various cults had been secretly expanding their influence and fighting with each other. This situation had been going on for 10 years. During these 10 years, it was not that the upper echelons of the human race did not know about their little tricks, but they had deliberately ignored them. The reason was very simple: they no longer had the heart and power to control them. In the end, in this critical moment of human survival at the front line, the cults that used to be a big problem in the past had become a minor problem. Situations like the one in Leinster City were everywhere in the human world. Troubled times were the best seedbed for the cults to bewitch people. There was nothing more blind than the frightened masses. They were like ignorant lambs being driven around. But what Bradley did not expect was that in this unprecedentedly comfortable environment, when everyone could eat and sleep well, and when their forces were expanding, someone would actually flip the table. The Brotherhood of Redemption was an ancient organization inherited from the World Salvation Society of the Second Era. It had been rooted in the country of scholars for hundreds of years. Although it was not as strong as the Saint Heroes Society, it was still a big tree with deep roots. In the past 10 years, it had developed rapidly and had many conflicts with the Saint Heroes Society. But Bradley never thought that they would dare to start a civil war. This could be said to have broken everyone's common bottom line. The main reason why the higher-ups of the human race turned a blind eye to them was that the cultists were only messing around under the table and would not really rebel. After all, the cultists were not fools, and the mutants were not religious. If they let them in, everyone would be doomed. The Saint Heroes Society believed that the Mother Goddess would lead the civilization to the end, and that all humans would return to the embrace of the Mother Goddess. However, this end must be brought by the Mother Goddess's messengers, and not those dirty and ugly aliens. In fact, the higher-ups of the Saint Heroes Society had indeed issued an order to stop the Brotherhood of Redemption. So when the lunatics of the Brotherhood of Redemption launched an attack in Leinster City, many forces, including the Buconia Garrison Legion and the Saint Heroes Society, joined forces to encircle and suppress them. But the result was beyond everyone's expectations. The Brotherhood of Redemption won with the help of a group of monsters that they summoned using some strange curse vessel. They were black-armored soldiers and black-robed clergy. They looked like humans, but they weren't. They didn't go out to battle during the day, but once night fell, they would wander over in groups. They would let out strange whispers from their mouths. Those who heard them would have a splitting headache, while those who heard them would go mad. Under the attack of these terrible monsters, the remaining Leinster garrison had retreated to St. Freya Academy, and a small number of students in the academy and the resident deputy dean, Estrella, were waiting for reinforcements. However, Bradley was not so lucky. After losing their primary target, the Brotherhood of Redemption targeted their old enemy, the Saint Heroes Society. Now, the Saint Heroes Society had holed up near Castle Worcester in the East City District, and they were about to be completely defeated. The news secretly sent back by the undercover agent tonight made Bradley even more desperate. The Saint Heroes Society's reinforcements were intercepted on the way. The death of the saint meant that the Saint Heroes Society in Leinster City had lost their last trump card. It was unknown how long it would take for the human reinforcements to arrive from the front line. The garrison in St. Freya Academy might be able to hold on until then, but the Saint Heroes Society would definitely be wiped out before then. If the order of the high-level council could not be fulfilled, all of them would die. They would either be killed by the monsters in the night, or be dealt with by the council. This desperate situation made the skinny middle-aged man drown his sorrows in alcohol. After downing another bottle of century-old red wine, Bradley's face was flushed red. He walked to the window and looked at the dim streets outside the castle, as if he could see the terrible monsters crawling out of the night. Knock! Knock! Who is it? Didn't I say not to disturb me? The sudden knock on the door interrupted the gray-faced man's imagination. It also made Bradley, who came back to his senses, a little angry. He yelled impatiently at the door, but he didn't expect to hear the excited report of the believer outside the door. Lord Bishop, the saint from the council has arrived. Saint? And what bullshit saint? Bradley thought angrily. He led a large group of people to the East City Gate, which was still in their hands. Behind him, the giant scorpion puppet followed closely. When he heard the soldiers say that the saint had arrived, Bradley was not happy at all. Instead, he broke out in a cold sweat. Others might not know what was going on with the saint, and might even be waiting anxiously, but he knew very well. Saint? The Brotherhood of Redemption had already killed him. Now, there was a 99% chance that he was their spy. At the torchlit city gate, Bradley saw the black-haired boy talking to the believers from a distance. Seeing this situation, the skinny middle-aged man waved his hand and ordered loudly. He's a fake. Catch him for me. The white-robed believers behind him rushed out from both sides, and the scorpion puppet made a strange roar. The believers around Luoya turned pale with fright and hurriedly retreated. For a time, the black-haired boy was surrounded. Not good. It seems that they have some information channels, or the saint and Bishop Bradley know each other. Luoya thought so in his heart. He could not help but frown slightly. According to the situation in the letter, the saint directly under the council should not meet with the local believers. In the letter, Bradley did not seem to know the name of the saint. This was a big reason why Luoya wanted to pretend to be the saint, but the reality did not develop as he imagined. Chapter 293. At the East City Gate of Leinster, countless white-robed men surrounded the young man at the gate with torches in their hands. The night wind was howling, but the air here seemed to be frozen. Bradley's voice echoed in the night, attracting everyone's attention. Everyone was waiting for Luoya's answer, but this question was too difficult for the young man. The name of the director who sent him here. This question touched on Luoya's greatest concern, which was the interpersonal relationships of this era. This was a situation that he could hardly grasp after entering the historical fragment. It was like a sharp sword, stabbing directly at his weak spot. Under the light of the torches, the black-haired young man was silent. Bradley's mouth was curved with a mixture of a smile and killing intent. Just as he was about to give the order, Luoya suddenly spoke. "Bradley, where did you get the courage to ask me to say the director's name in public?" Under the gaze of the believers, the black-haired young man gritted his teeth and questioned sternly, which made the middle-aged man's momentum falter. Bradley looked at Luoya's angry face and was stunned. He realized that he did ask some questions, but he didn't want to change his answer in public. More importantly, if he didn't say it in public, Bradley would have to talk to Luoya privately, which he absolutely couldn't do. Because Bradley was from the puppet school. In the puppet school, when the puppet was activated, the body didn't have much combat power. When the puppet wasn't activated, although the combat power would increase, it was still far weaker than the same level. The other party might be here to assassinate him, so how could Bradley be stupid enough to stay with him? These are all trustworthy believers, you can say it. After thinking for a moment, Bradley said so with a flicker in his eyes. However, what he didn't know was that Luoya had already expected his answer. Devout believers. Hearing this, the black-haired young man's golden eyes lit up, and an angry smile appeared on his face. "Before coming here, I also thought that you would be devout believers, but after entering the city, I only felt one kind of emotion, fear." "What did you say?" Bradley asked angrily, but Roja didn't pay attention to him. He gritted his teeth and glanced sharply at the crowd. Then he asked loudly. In less than a week, 3/4 of the city of Leinster had been occupied. The orders of the council were not carried out at all. Even Prandal, who was sent as reinforcements, had died on the way. When you were running for your lives, did you ever think about the glory of the Mother Goddess? You. Bradley Dennis. Cowardly and timidly. Why are you still talking to me about being devout? What is devout? Hundreds of years ago, the young director Deoj Lasai returned to the embrace of God's embrace on the vast sea. His soul will forever follow the great Mother Goddess, but what about you? How are you compared to him? Bishop Bradley? The black-haired young man stared at the middle-aged man in front of him with burning eyes, causing Bradley's expression to change drastically. Director Deoj Lasai, this name was no longer circulated in the Saint Heroes Society, but Bradley was absolutely familiar with it, because strictly speaking, he was the early leader of the puppet school in the Saint Heroes Society. Legend had it that he reached the source level 2 at a young age, but in order to delay the enemy during a mission, he entered the embrace of God's messenger in advance. Although Deoj Lasai's deeds were publicized, after hundreds of years, no one except the younger generation of the puppet school knew about it. For Luoya to mention this name, the only possibility was that he had seen the records of that time at the director's headquarters. Comparing Deoj Lasai to Bradley could be said to be a rather obscure reprimand. Deoj Lasai was already a source level 2 at a young age, and his position was high enough to be a director. Bradley, who was so old, had just broken through to the source level 2 not long ago and was only a bishop. Deoj Lasai fought tenaciously and returned to the embrace of God's messenger for faith, but Bradley was almost defeated and battered. The two were simply incomparable. Thinking of this, the middle-aged man's face turned red, but he did not dare to speak casually anymore. This was because Luoya's reprimand had vaguely proved his identity and made him panic. Is he really the saint's messenger? Bradley's face turned ugly and his eyes wandered. Luoya did not pursue the matter further. He took a deep breath as if to calm his anger, then looked at the middle-aged man calmly and said, "You asked who asked me to come here. I'll tell you. All the members of the board unanimously agreed to transfer me here from Twin Horn Port. Strictly speaking, I'm a special envoy. It seems that the letter from the board has not arrived yet, so it's normal that you don't know me." Twin Horn Port. Bradley's eyes widened when he heard the familiar name. That was the resting place of God's messenger that only the higher-ups of the Saint Heroes Society knew about. It was a pilgrimage place for the believers of Mother Goddess, and because it was also the place where Deoj Lasai died, Bradley had been there once when he was young and was one of the few bishops who knew about it. Luoya came from Twin Horn Port, so he was almost certain that he was a higher-up directly under the board. With this thought in mind, Daoj Lasai trusted the young man even more. Luoya, who noticed the bishop's reaction when he heard about Twin Horn Port, narrowed his golden pupils and continued to speak. You don't know me, but you should know this aura. This is the grace given to me by God's messenger. The black-haired young man raised his hand as if he had received God's grace. The next moment, white mist began to condense in his palm. It was the terrifying cold air from the frozen earth. It was the tip of the iceberg of the monster that once sealed the earth and destroyed civilization. The moment it was released, the believers felt uneasy, but Bradley felt as if he was struck by lightning. This was the aura of the messenger of Mother Goddess who was sleeping in the abyss of the sea. Bradley, who had been to Twin Horn Port and felt the aura of the frozen earth, was excited. At this moment, he completely believed in Luoya's identity. At the same time, he looked at him with a warm gaze. Chapter 294. The Saint Luoya had become the light in the hearts of all the believers of the Mother Goddess tonight. He was the Redeemer, the grace of the Mother Goddess for her desperate children. He was also the Punisher, the thunder and lightning that judged all blasphemers of the Mother Goddess. In the eastern district of Leinster, the fearless believers began an unbelievable all-out counterattack with red eyes. The front line formed by the black-armored soldiers and black-clothed clergy was destroyed as the battle cries shook the entire city. Beside the black-haired youth, the most elite disciples of the Mother Goddess formed a personal guard, pledging their lives to protect the greatest saint. Bishop Bradley's eyes were red with bloodlust as he stood on top of the giant scorpion puppet, leading the charge. He knew that this was his last chance. The Mother Goddess is watching me. The passionate fanatics roared and rushed into the crowd to launch a suicide attack. The front line of the Brotherhood of Redemption was almost smashed to pieces. Realizing that something was wrong, the Brotherhood of Redemption hurriedly sent reinforcements, but they still could not stop the burning soldiers. Damn it! What the hell is going on? Are the lackeys of the Mother Goddess crazy? At the headquarters of the Brotherhood of Redemption, Bishop Santos listened to the report of his subordinates. He felt like he was in a dream, and he could not understand the current situation. The Saint Heroes Society was depressed during the day, and they were about to die. At night, their morale did not completely collapse. Instead, it was as if they were injected with chicken blood. How was this possible? What about our Redemption Legion? How did they break through the blockade of the Redemption Legion? I heard that the arrival of the Saint Heroes Society attracted the attention of the Mother Goddess here. Bullshit. The saint has been killed by us long ago. Where did the saint come from? Santos interrupted his subordinates angrily. After thinking for a while, he decided to see the situation himself. However, as he approached the battlefield, the gloomy middle-aged man's face began to turn ugly. Shouts of killing, full of morale, and earth-shattering shouts came almost continuously from the front. The turbulent flow of magic essence, the screams of the believers, everything told Santos the fierceness of the enemy in front. Quickly stepping on the high platform, the surprised man looked into the distance and saw a black-haired youth walking in the center of the team under the soaring flames. He was covered in moonlight, and his golden eyes were shining like candlelight. A strange spell wave was emitted from his body, and the whispers of the black soldiers and clergy were dissolved under the wave. He was surrounded by Bishop Bradley of the Saint Heroes Society and a group of high-level believers in white robes. A giant scorpion-shaped puppet stood in front of him. Countless warriors were shouting the names of the Saint Apostle and Mother Goddess as they charged forward fearlessly. Damn it, how is this possible? Do they have two saints? Santos stared at the black-haired youth in the team, and his expression changed sharply. To be able to resist the blasphemous whispers of the Redemption Legion and organize such a large formation to make all the believers fearless of death, there seemed to be no other possibility except for the saint. If it was really the saint, then the Brotherhood of Redemption must greatly adjust their strategy. The strength of the Saint Heroes Society was not necessarily strong, because the selection of the saint was not measured by strength. Otherwise, it would not be so easy to kill them. In fact, the existence of the saint was more like a key. They could activate the trump card of the Saint Heroes Society. According to the instructions Santos received from above, this was the only thing that must be avoided. For this purpose, they spent a lot of effort to intercept and kill the saint, but now it seemed that the other party was well prepared. In the end, one of them still slipped in. The situation must be reported to the Lord immediately. With this thought in mind, Santos angrily stared in the direction of Luoya and left the front line amidst the Saint Heroes Society's imposing shouts. Bradley felt as if he was in a dream. 2 hours later, when the sun rose, the Saint Heroes Society stopped attacking under the orders of the saint. By this time, they had recovered all of the East City District and part of the North City District, expanding their sphere of influence by twofold in one breath, almost back to before the start of the war. This was the first and only great victory since the start of the war. It greatly encouraged the believers and saved Bradley, who was on the verge of death. Luoya also completely became the leader of the Leinster Saint Heroes Society in this battle. The black-haired youth looked at the cheering crowd in silence. Now that things had developed to this point, the infiltration mission was basically a complete success. Now, who would dare to doubt Luoya? He did not need to do anything, as the believers would help him turn the other party into ashes. Of course, in addition to completely controlling the Saint Heroes Society, Luoya also had a second consideration, which was to make a big move and attract everyone's attention. Whether it was the legions and students in St. Freya's Academy or Lillian who might be in the city, Luoya needed them to discover him before he could talk about other things. Especially the latter, finding his senior was now his #1 goal. Of course, in order to make a big move, the Saint Heroes Society had to pay a high price. Luoya's crown source substance only provided resistance against the whispers that made people go crazy. It did not affect the combat power of the black-armored soldiers and black-clothed clergy. The Saint Heroes Society actually won the battle with fewer people tonight. It was all because of their incredible morale and fearless fighting style that they could achieve such a great victory. But Luoya did not feel bad about it at all. Death, they could all die. After all, it was a cult after a cult, so it was not wrong for them to die. Moreover, they were indeed not afraid of death. The devout believers have defended the glory, and their souls have returned to Mother Goddess. Chapter 295. Lillian knew that she wasn't normal right now. For the first time since she was born, the young girl's mind was in a mess even though her body was perfectly fine. All sorts of messy information converged, and intense emotions cut her nerves like sharp knives. Luoya had expected that Lillian's emotions would be unstable. After all, the young man believed that Lillian's friends who had died tragically in the cellar had a huge impact on her and shook her spirit. Suddenly entering a part of history made it even more difficult for her to get used to it. However, what he didn't know was that none of this was important to the current Lillian. Right now, there was only one thing in Lillian's mind, and it was a fact that she couldn't accept. Her younger brother had gone missing. If Lillian recalled correctly, before they parted, Luoya had indeed told her that he had killed the evil cult's bishop, Matthew, and that he wasn't in a good condition. In this dangerous world filled with monsters, in a city that was both familiar and unfamiliar, what did it mean to be in a bad condition? Lillian didn't dare to think about it, because those thoughts would probably drive her insane. It's all my fault. If I didn't touch him, the black-haired young girl muttered to herself. The uncontrollable worry and regret in her heart made Lillian choke up. When Luoya entered the academy, Lillian had received an order from the Austin Empire's emperor, Lucas, that she wasn't to come into contact with the Akkad family. Strictly speaking, Lillian could have avoided this situation completely. Although Luoya had caught her, the young man was wearing gloves, and Lillian was the one who had caused the situation to develop to such a state. In the end, it was because Lillian had let down her guard after being together for such a long time. Especially when she heard Luoya say, "I need you," Lillian felt as if a certain part of her body had been mended, and she couldn't help but want to get close to him. However, she didn't expect that her unbridled desire would drag her newly recognized younger brother into such a dangerous situation. The irritating whispers entered her ears again. The black-haired young girl's purple eyes turned, and she looked coldly at the countless monsters hiding in the building. So noisy, the girl who had her thoughts interrupted waved her hand. In the next moment, a dense rain of arrows was shot towards the enemy. The black-armored soldiers and black-robed clergy fell in droves under the attack. Amidst the sound of the horn, the armored soldiers raised their swords and charged forward. They began to annihilate the enemy one by one. The sound of clashing swords and shattering armor continued. The smell of blood also spread rapidly. Lillian looked at these strange enemies and her heart was filled with concern for Luoya. According to her understanding from last night, the annoying murmurs of these monsters would cause headaches or even madness for ordinary people. However, the effects on Lillian were much weaker. Although Lillian would feel uncomfortable every time she heard the murmurs, her bloodline would react and counteract the terrifying effects as if it was protecting her. She was doing well for the time being, but what about Luoya? Although they were of the same bloodline, Luoya was only level 4 of the source level. His body was not in good condition. Could he resist these monsters? The black-haired young girl beside the overturned holy statue clenched her trembling hands. She felt that if she continued to think like this, her mind would not be able to hold on. Sensing this, the young girl repeatedly took deep breaths. Her brain began to think of a way to find Luoya. After a month of interaction and the blood envelope incident, Lillian had a good understanding of Luoya. Therefore, she could more or less predict his behavior. As a meticulous person, Luoya would not rashly go to the academy now. Neither he nor Lillian could enter under such circumstances. Even if they did, the two of them would definitely be detained and supervised. Losing his freedom in such an inexplicable environment was undoubtedly a bad move. Luoya would not choose that. Therefore, the only choice left was the outer city. This area was currently the most chaotic place in Leinster. According to the information obtained from the cultists last night, 2 cultists were fighting on a large scale. These monsters were the trump cards of one of the cultists. Would Luoya side with the cultists? How could that be? Her beloved brother was kind and righteous, law-abiding. How could he be involved with cultists? Lillian shook her head as she thought. She did not know that Luoya had become the leader of a cult in a single night. Her analysis suggested that Luoya must be defending himself against the monsters with the advantage of his bloodline. Of course, all of this was built on the basis that Luoya wanted to find her sister and reunite with her. Otherwise, the forest outside the city would be the least dangerous choice. At the thought of this, the girl became timid. There was no doubt that the two of them were related by blood. However, it was still unknown whether Luoya would acknowledge her. Considering that Luoya was a noble of the theocracy and his relationship with Ratchet, the disadvantages of acknowledging her as his sister would outweigh the advantages. If he did not want her when the time came. Just imagining this situation made Lillian's purple eyes sour. She was worried about her personal gains and losses. The horn sounded again. Another wave of soldiers charged at the black-armored monsters. The girl who was awakened by the sound hurriedly shook her head. She recalled the black-haired youth's expression when they parted and encouraged herself. No. If it's Luoya, he won't. Lillian stroked her chest and gradually calmed down. The light of rationality returned to her purple eyes. After a moment, she had decided on how to reunite. Chapter 296. Luoya was in a terrible state. It had been less than 6 hours since he entered the historical fragment. From the time he impersonated the saint and confronted Bradley, to the time he led the fanatics of the Saint Heroes Society to the point where he was victorious until dawn, everything seemed to be going smoothly. However, every step he took was filled with trepidation. Most importantly, he had consumed too much energy. Luoya was able to create miracles because the Black Rose Ring had brought Luoya to meet these strange monsters in the academy at night. In the past month, in order to unlock the authority, Luoya had used the crown source substance to perform various experiments. One of them was to suppress the black-armored soldiers within a certain range. But it had to be said that Luoya's research in the academy yielded little results. The only use of the source substance to release waves to suppress the enemies within a certain range was to make Luoya's head feel better and less uncomfortable. But in this battlefield, this technique was reborn. Because Luoya had teammates, and he didn't need to look at the battle damage ratio. Luoya was very sure that the skill wasn't used in vain. But correspondingly, he had consumed a lot of energy and had to rest and recover as soon as possible. On the other hand, he also needed to gather more information. The black-haired young man frowned after glancing at the system evaluation. He wasn't too satisfied with the result. The increase of 37 points in one night seemed huge, but Luoya knew the characteristics of the system's evaluation. The lower the score, the easier it was to increase it. The higher the score, the harder it was to increase it. If this was the case, the 30 points might not even be as good as the 5 points when the score was high. Luoya had two guesses about this situation. The first was that although Luoya had killed a bunch of cultists from both sides, they were all cannon fodder and didn't have any outstanding leaders, so his score wasn't that high. The other reason was that Luoya's objective was wrong. After all, he wasn't here to help the Holy Heroes Guild turn the tables. The medium of this historical fragment was the Ring of the Black Rose, which came from Scholar Estrid. Anyone with a normal brain would seek refuge with her. In fact, if it weren't for Lillian, Luoya would have thought of a way to do so. Luoya only attacked the enemy indirectly and did not provide any direct help to the allies. This was probably the reason for his low score. However, Luoya didn't really care about this. What was the point of having a high score? Could it be exchanged for a living person? The most important thing was to find his senior. Everything else was nonsense. As for the means, Luoya already had a plan. In the solemn hall, the believers who had just experienced a battle were gathered here. Many of them were covered in dust and some were even injured, but their spirits were abnormally high. This was because in front of them, a black-haired young man was looking at them with his golden eyes, while Bishop Bradley stood respectfully to the side. Everyone, in last night's battle, we defended the glory of Mother Goddess and proved our piety with our actions. The filthy blasphemers were driven back by us, and the momentum of the Brotherhood of Redemption has been greatly reduced. Now in this city, the homeless imitators must have heard of our bravery, and they must be eagerly inquiring about us. Therefore, we must make a sound. Let my name spread throughout Leinster, let all enemies know of the arrival of Mother Goddess. The solemn-looking young man ordered, and the excited believers immediately responded. Luoya looked at the believers who were madly repeating his name. He estimated that in less than 3 days, everyone in Leinster would know of him. The black-haired young man nodded with satisfaction and looked at the morning sun outside the window, silently praying for the safety of the girl. Castle Worcester in the Eastern City District welcomed its new owner today. After dawn, the black-haired young man was escorted by a large group of people to Castle Worcester, the headquarters of the Leinster St. Heroes Guild. The owners of the large buildings in the city, the Worcester family, had died in the turmoil, and now the largest family property was temporarily requisitioned. After stepping on the red carpet that represented victory into the castle, the loyal believers immediately strengthened the security here, with sentries every 5 steps and sentries every 10 steps. When Bishop Bradley returned, he applied to Luoya to retrieve the sacred relic, and the black-haired young man quietly approved after some consideration. On the one hand, Luoya's identity as a saint envoy was destined to personally control the so-called sacred relic of the Saint Heroes Guild. On the other hand, Bishop Bradley's departure gave him time to fully understand the current situation. In fact, since entering the historical fragment until now, Luoya's feelings were quite chaotic. In the past, the forces in the 2 historical fragments would choose one of the 2, and one side would have the ancestors, so there was no need to think at all. The purpose of both sides was also very clear, so he just had to follow and be done with it. But this time was different. Not only had the forces become three, but Luoya could not even figure out what each of them was doing. On the surface, it seemed that the Brotherhood of Redemption was attacking the city, the Evening Sage was defending the city, and the Saint Heroes Guild was being beaten, but in fact, all three sides had a strange feeling, which made Luoya feel uneasy. First of all, the Brotherhood of Redemption. At such a critical juncture in the war with the aliens, this group of people suddenly rebelled. Was it really just because they were sick? And what was the meaning of this rebellion? What did they want to do? In history, all rebellions had to overthrow the old forces, so they had to have a good reason. But the Brotherhood of Redemption actually released so many black monsters, and if it were not for the other two sides restraining them, they would have directly massacred the city. Who would follow such lunatics? How could this rebellion succeed? Or was it that the Brotherhood of Redemption was a rebel volunteer, and he rebelled for the sake of rebelling? Secondly, the garrison troops and students in St. Freya Academy basically belonged to the Evening Sage Guild. This group of people also had problems, and the biggest problem was last night. Last night, Luoya led the fanatics to attack the Brotherhood of Redemption and had the upper hand the whole time. The momentum was unprecedentedly great, and almost all the monsters in the North City district were attracted. This situation was simply a heaven-sent opportunity in military terms. As long as St. Freya Academy opened the city and sent troops to attack from the front and back, the Brotherhood of Redemption would definitely be beaten to a pulp last night. At that time, the Saint Heroes Guild and the Brotherhood of Redemption would each occupy half of the periphery of Leinster, and the situation would obviously be much better. But in the face of this heaven-sent opportunity, they were actually indifferent. Was it purely because of poor command and passive defense, or was there a reason why the scholars and guardians could not come out? The last one was the Saint Heroes Guild, who played the role of the younger brother in this war. In fact, they were indeed the younger brother, but since they were the younger brother, why were they still stubbornly holding on? Chapter 297. Luoya didn't know how long it had been since he last had this feeling. It was the hazy feeling of being guided in his sleep, like a pilgrim who was about to meet his God. Under this guidance, his mind was numb as if it was protected, and his body's reaction seemed to be blocked. Exhaustion was like an iceberg in the sea. Most of it was hidden under the surface of the water, leaving only an insignificant part in Luoya's heart. If there was one thing that could cause him to be sluggish and slightly surprised, it would be the unprecedented environment. The street. It wasn't the blood-red plains of the Gulen Daer, nor was it the valley surrounded by Pei Tila's body. Instead, it was a holy white, spacious and bright imperial road that seemed to welcome a victorious king. It was purely man-made. This was completely different from the pilgrimage of the past, which made Luoya's remaining thoughts jump, but this didn't affect the guidance. The black-haired boy walked on the road that seemed to emit a faint white light under the sun, and continued to move towards the towering and huge palace. Fluttering flags, towering towers, and scarlet-red carpets with golden embroidery displayed nobility and glory. Layers upon layers of majestic city gates opened, and the resplendent interior of the magnificent buildings displayed the prosperity of this magnificent place. Luoya never thought that the existence he met this time would actually live in a place like the Holy Kingdom in people's fantasies. After all, the environment of the ancient gods who followed him didn't show him any traces of ancient civilization. In a state of numbness, Luoya passed through a long corridor and arrived in front of a door. The black-haired boy walked to the door and stopped for the first time. His brain reflexively knew where this place was. This was the core of the whole building, and also the place where the gods lived. In the empty palace, no one opened the door for him, but with a rumbling sound, the gorgeous and heavy door opened naturally. Inside the palace, a ray of light leaked out from the gap between Luoya's eyebrows and gradually expanded to both sides. At the same time, solemn and classical music began to sound. The top of the hall suddenly lit up, and golden powder-like powder fell down. It floated to the ground and turned into flowers with a bang. In the middle of the golden rain and the sea of flowers, a white-haired woman sat on the throne on the high platform as if she was sleeping. She was about 17 or 18 years old. Her delicate skin was like white jade, but it didn't lose its color. Her vermilion lips were small and cute without makeup. Her slender body was exquisite in the tight dress, and her long eyelashes cast beautiful arc-shaped shadows on her eyelids. Perhaps she was awakened by the music, or perhaps she sensed someone's arrival, but the woman's eyelids trembled slightly. After a moment, she slowly opened. When her bright red pupils appeared to be exposed, to be seen, Luoya suddenly woke up. The black-haired boy's body trembled, and he carefully looked up at the high platform. The white-haired woman seemed to be in a trance, but when her red eyes met Luoya's gaze, her face revealed a familiar and warm smile, which surprised Luoya. Finally, we meet. My name is Altacia. I am the Queen of Witches. The white-haired woman said and stretched out her finger, as if she was a teacher explaining the key points of knowledge. However, Luoya's eyes widened when he heard this sentence. Witches, this term was no joke in Xia. It was not a derogatory term used by those women who were burned to death on groundless charges in Luoya's previous life. It was a group of witches that did exist. The number of witches was too small, and they did not like to live in groups, so they could not be called a race. However, in ancient times, they had a considerable status, but compared to other powerful races, they were not favored by humans. In various existing myths, their images were basically old witches who looked like both humans and ghosts, or they did not even look human. They were regarded as the incarnation of disaster, an existence that humans could not understand. This kind of group should not have a king to speak of, and the first thing they did was to introduce themselves. When did the gods become so easy to talk to? Is that what you think? Suddenly, the boy's golden pupils shrank. Altacia saw this and smiled proudly. Then, she looked at Luoya and stretched out her fingers to twirl her hair in confusion. That's too much. What's wrong with introducing yourself? You're obviously a special existence, so it's not good to look at others with prejudice. No, it's okay. You don't have to explain or apologize. I'm not so narrow-minded. Also, since it's Lord Hero, I forgive you. Before Luoya could finish his explanation, Altacia snapped her fingers and smiled. Her scarlet eyes looked at Luoya, and the corners of her mouth curled up cutely. In contrast, Luoya was filled with confusion. Lord Hero. That's right. The Lord Hero who freed Altacia from eternal death. Chapter 298. Soon, it's time. Above the sea of flowers, the white-haired woman said with a hint of sadness and reluctance. Luoya didn't reply and only responded with silence. However, for our first meeting, it's already quite long. We even went on a date and had a wonderful time together. Why do you want to go on a date with me? For something like a date, it can't be just because I can bring you out of death, right? Is a witch the kind of person who would seek to repay a favor before doing it? Under Altacia's astonished gaze, the black-haired young man tilted his head and looked at the witch. His golden eyes were filled with rationality and calmness. The delicate fragrance of flowers filled his nose. Altacia's skin and white hair seemed to glow under the contrast of her dark-colored dress. The two of them looked at each other for a long time. After a long time, the witch curled her lips and narrowed her scarlet eyes. Of course not. How can there be such a person among the witches? Altacia stood up, and the delicate and cute expression on her face faded slightly. Facing Luoya's question, for the first time, she revealed a joyful smile like a witch with hidden meaning. The reason for going on a date with you is very simple. Because you are the only existence who is qualified to walk side by side with me. Hearing the unexpected answer, Luoya's pupils contracted slightly. Altacia smiled, and then suddenly changed the topic. Right, there's one more thing that I've always wanted someone to try. Heh, what do you think it is? Altacia revealed a mischievous smile. Without waiting for Luo Ya's reply, she reached out and snapped her fingers. The next moment, the young man's vision changed, and he appeared on the throne in the middle of the sea of flowers. How is it? The view here is very wide, right? The sudden change of position made Luoya widen his eyes. Altacia's voice immediately entered his ears. The young man tilted his head and saw the witch standing beside the throne with a smile. I'm watching everything from here, so I've always wanted others to experience this feeling. However, I can't easily give away something that I've used. But since it's you, it's fine. How is it? Do you like it? Luoya didn't know how to answer for a moment as he looked at the witch who was smiling sweetly and looking expectantly at him. Seeing this, Altacia raised her finger and exclaimed, as if she had thought of something. Ah, right, no one is allowed to stand next to the throne. I made a mistake. The white-haired girl shyly stroked her cheeks and disappeared in the next moment. When she reappeared, she was already below the high platform. If it's my position, it should be here. Looking around with a face full of novelty, Altacia turned her head to look at Luoya, curled her lips, and lifted her skirt to salute. When the witch queen obediently lowered her head, a strange feeling began to grow in Luoya's heart. It was a feeling of superiority, power, possessiveness, and control. It was a feeling of omnipotence and wanting to control everything. As expected, there are still people below. How about it? If you look from there, the people below look very small, right? That's right. Luoya, whose golden eyes lit up slightly, hesitated for a moment before nodding slightly. Altacia blinked her eyes as she saw this, and her smile became even brighter. Does Lord Hero want to be king? What? I'm already sick of that place, but Lord Hero hasn't sat on it yet, right? No, I don't have such intentions. Chapter 299. In the room, Luoya's body stiffened as he held the box in his hand. A series of system notifications popped up in his mind. Ding! Detected mutated crown stone. Preparing to reconstruct bloodline, the system notification and the contents revealed allowed Luoya to instantly understand what was in his hand. It was the crown stone. Luoya was so excited that his hands trembled slightly. He was not in a good state. The Gulan Daer and Pei Tila could not be contacted. Lillian was missing, and it was hard to tell whether Altacia was good or evil. Luoya really needed power, and what the crown stone represented was self-explanatory. So far, apart from the help of the ancient gods, Luoya's greatest combat power was the frozen earth touch, skill brought by the crown stone. It could be said that this was his trump card to overcome all the difficulties. Thinking of this, the teenager carefully opened the box. The dense spell seals immediately came into view. The internal structure of the box was divided into 2 layers. The first layer was the body of the box and the lock were engraved with strange words. The second layer was a transparent gem. In the middle of the crystal-clear gem, a cloud of air the size of a fingernail was slowly rolling. Its shape was like a vague human figure. The moment he saw the strange dust-colored cloud of chaotic air, a name popped up in Luoya's mind. It was one of the 6 disasters of the mother goddess mentioned by Isabella. It was also a terrifying existence in the legends that destroyed many long-lived races, including the Ents. The Wind Summoner. This was the name given to it by the ancient Ents. Cade once mentioned it to Luoya. Legends said that it could only be seen in the hazy moments before death. It was a blurry figure that covered the sky and earth in the sandstorm. It could not be understood, could not be communicated, and always looked down on the world with a faceless face. This was the sacred artifact. Luoya stared at the wind summoner in his hand that was still in the egg form. He finally understood why the Brotherhood of Redemption was afraid. He also sighed at the madness of the Saint Heroes Society's higher-ups. Fortunately, Santos and the others had killed the saint. Otherwise, the whole of Leinster would have been in grave danger in front of the wind summoners, and would have been wiped off the map. As expected, a cult was a cult. They might have the same goal as normal people for a while, but their different views would only lead to a greater tragedy in the end. Holding the box containing the egg in his hand, Luoya pondered for a moment and didn't choose to absorb it immediately. Right now, he still needed this thing to deter the other party and balance the situation. Moreover, when he recalled the last time he absorbed the egg of the frozen earth creator, Luoya felt a little guilty. But at the same time, he also made a discovery. The wind summoner's egg was a sparkling gem, and it seemed to be an imitation of the Sorofia's gem curse. The frozen earthmaker's egg was a golden soul seal. Both of the Highland Elf specialties were methods to restrict the 6 disasters. Was this a coincidence? After pondering for a long time, Luoya shook his head and didn't delve into it. He then signaled Bradley to write a letter to agree to a meeting at noon the next day. After a night of chaotic battle, the Saint Heroes Society's believers were exhausted and needed rest. Moreover, noon was the time when the black-armored monsters were least active, so such an arrangement should be just right. After finalizing the details of the ceasefire negotiations, the black-haired young man asked about the contact with St. Freya's Academy. Luoya didn't come here to be a cult leader. He didn't have the noble character of a comrade who established a country to hide his identity to complete his mission. Being able to leave this den of thieves and enter the academy was something Luoya wished for, and the reply he received was indeed satisfactory. According to Bradley, when the garrison retreated into the academy, some of the wounded fell behind. In order to avoid the monsters, they fled to the Saint Heroes Society's territory. At that time, the Saint Heroes Society was in a difficult situation and naturally didn't have time to care about them. However, the situation was different now, and they could be used as messengers. After receiving the news, Luoya's eyes lit up, and he immediately went to meet the remaining soldiers. When the black-haired young man entered, the wounded soldiers were still very alert. However, to their surprise, Luoya didn't make any sarcastic remarks, nor did he take them hostage. Instead, he let them all go. In the face of a common threat, different species can work together, let alone us humans. Letting all of you leave is my sincerity. Give this to General Antonio and tell him that I have something important to discuss with him. After handing one of the symbols of the Saint Heroes Society, Cade's steel amber to the leader of the wounded soldiers, Luoya let them go. Until the end, the young man didn't reveal the news of the current dean, Pris. The main reason for hiding this matter was that Luoya's current identity couldn't be revealed. The difference in status between the two was too big. When the cult leader said not to trust his own respected dean, not to mention General Antonio, even Luoya himself felt that it was nonsense. If the wounded soldiers heard it, they might think that he was trying to shake the morale of the army and directly refused to pass on the message. In that case, wouldn't Luoya's efforts be in vain? After thinking about it, Luoya realized that it was useless to say anything. He simply didn't want to look for trouble. After letting the wounded soldiers go, the young man rested in peace to recover his condition and prepared for the next day's peace talks. Throughout the night, the situation at the Saint Heroes Society's front line was relatively calm for the first time since the automatic chaos. Although there were sporadic monster attacks throughout the night, they were all killed by the believers' curses and didn't lose any territory. Regarding this, Luoya's behavior was very strange. Although it was possible for the two armies to cease fire in advance before the war negotiations, now both sides were not disciplined armies, but fierce cultists. The wording in Santos's letter was extremely strong. Normally, they should be attacking with all their strength tonight to regain the momentum they lost yesterday and fight for chips for today's negotiations. Why was there no movement at all? The strange Luoya worried that there was a trap and that he had taken advantage of the Saint Heroes Society's network. As a result, he learned from the undercover that the Brotherhood of Redemption seemed to have a fire in their backyard. Last night, they sent a large number of troops to the South City District. The situation seemed to be so serious that the higher-ups ordered a lockdown on the news, so he didn't know the specific situation. Chapter 300. What was the best way to attack a person? The simplest way was no different from a physical attack, but in most cases, this was inevitably too rude and would arouse a strong reaction. In the absence of a physical attack, it was also a good choice to attack the opponent's spirit. There were many ways to attack the spirit. This time, facing Luoya, Santos chose to attack in the way of life. Unlike the Saint Heroes Society, which advocated the pursuit of miracles, the Brotherhood of Redemption advocated indulgence. While they pursued great power, they were inevitably tainted with madness. Without the restraint of reason, their desires would become more and more naked. Under the mixture of various desires, their lives were destined to be extravagant and licentious. These were simply too tempting for teenagers with weak wills, especially those who had yet to form a worldview. Santos had actually heard of the cultivation method of the saints. He heard that they were constantly injected with a strange curse vessel from an early age. It seemed to be a synthetic curse vessel that simulated the bloodline of an ancient family. Those who could integrate well and survive had the opportunity to become a saint. The saints were tools, and they were also one-time tools to activate the Saint Heroes Society's trump card. Other than adaptability, they did not need to be cultivated vigorously. Therefore, their general strength was not high. They lived in the Saint Heroes Society's council and lived almost an isolated life in their childhood. Their understanding of the outside world was very limited. In the end, they were country bumpkins who had never seen the world. They probably had never even touched a woman's hand. In the cheers of the guests, Santos walked down the stairs and came to the other end of the long table where Luoya was. The moment he sat down, the music began to ring slowly again. The men and women of the Brotherhood of Redemption resumed their activities. The waiter stepped forward and respectfully served him the mixed wine. Opposite him, Luoya was unattended. There was nothing on the table until Santos accidentally discovered this impolite scene. He exaggeratedly reprimanded the waiter. The reprimand was neither light nor heavy, made the men and women behind him cover their mouths and chuckle. The waiter who obeyed the order served a glass of wine in front of Luoya. His words and actions were quite casual. His attitude was casual, and the wine was naturally mixed casually. Luoya glanced at the glass. He had no interest in this charity. He raised his eyes, looked at the middle-aged man opposite him, and asked faintly, "Mr. Santos, if I remember correctly, we are going to negotiate a truce, right?" "That's right, Mr. Envoy." "Then what is this absurd banquet? I don't see your sincerity." "About this, Mr. Luoya seems to have misunderstood. This is our way of showing our friendliness." Santos looked back at the crowd on the dance floor and the men and women who were intoxicated by the smell of alcohol. He explained with a smile, "Don't worry. We, the Brotherhood of Redemption, are a truthful and self-obedient organization. The Lord gave us strength and gave us a better life. The banquet is a way for us to relax and be honest with each other." "Oh. So this is your welcoming ceremony for me?" "Of course, we are very sincere, and even unguarded," the middle-aged man said as he waved his hand, and a beautiful young girl immediately came from behind. Santos put his arm around the young girl's slender waist and pulled her into his arms amidst the woman's laughter. He smiled at the young man who was looking at him calmly. "But I admit that I didn't think it through. Mr. Luoya is a saint. You live in a different environment from us. You probably haven't experienced this kind of life, right?" Facing the young man's silence, Santos's smile became deeper and deeper. He touched the young girl's body twice and asked with a smile, "Mr. Luoya, have you experienced it?" "What? Have you experienced the feeling of being a woman?" Hearing Santos's explicit words, Luoya's face sank slightly. He raised his eyebrows and said faintly, "Mr. Santos, this is not a topic we need to talk about." "Of course not, but we can talk about that later. I think we should reach a friendly relationship before that." This is the basis of negotiation. This banquet actually has this purpose. What? Listening to the middle-aged man's fallacy, Luoya, who had been mocked since he entered the door, frowned. Santos stood up and proposed. In order to express friendship, how about we dance together according to the custom of the country of scholars? Although Mr. Luoya is away from worldly affairs, you should have no problem dancing, right? Santos's smile was a little mocking, and the men and women behind him also looked at him with mocking eyes. Chapter 301. Inside the Westminster Mansion, a rather magical scene was unfolding at this time. In front of the crowd, Lillian, who was holding Luoya's hand, spoke indifferently and plainly. She didn't even have any murderous intent, but in reality, she was bidding farewell to Her Royal Highness the Empress. In the rumbling sound of the ground shaking, all the doors and windows in the Westminster Mansion were smashed into pieces at the same time. Wood chips and glass debris wrapped the heavily armored knights and rushed into the banquet hall from all directions to surround the enemy. Those were the knights in unusually heavy dark blue armor, holding shields and spears on their backs. They had sharp long swords, neighing horses, and fluttering flags with the pattern of a blue spear. When they rushed into the hall, the crowd panicked and screamed. Luoya looked up and stared at the knights. Her pupils couldn't help but shrink. This flag. The Blue Knights of the ancient Austin Empire. The strong force that left a mark in history suddenly appeared in front of her. This strong impact made Luoya couldn't help but widen her eyes. However, everything wasn't over yet. When the people in the banquet hall shouted and the horses neighed, a low horn suddenly sounded, followed by a strange sound. Wah, wah, wah. The strange sound came from outside the window and became louder and louder. The panicked guards ran to the window to check, and then their faces turned ashen. As the sound source got closer and closer, everyone present knew what it was. It was the sound of uniform footsteps. Unknowingly, the entire Westminster Mansion had been surrounded by countless soldiers. Large shields and heavy armor were connected together, reflecting the sunlight. The flags were like a forest, and the horns were incessant. The marching footsteps were like stepping on people's hearts. Under the protection of the knights, Lillian's purple eyes were as cold as ice. She looked at the gloomy Santos as if she was looking at a dead man. Source rank, too, was indeed strong, but it was only one level higher than Lillian. However, the difference in combat power between the two was like heaven and earth. In front of these fearless warriors who had come out of history to defend the great ancient Austin Empire, a level 2 source level fighter like Santos was just a little bit of a challenge. In fact, the leader of the Brotherhood of Redemption did not dare to move because there were nearly 100 level 4 source level Blue Knights in the mansion alone. Although Lillian was alone, she had thousands of troops. This banquet seemed to be surrounded by the Brotherhood of Redemption, but in fact, they were surrounded by Lillian alone. The men and women in the banquet hall didn't know where the troops came from. Some were trembling, some begging for mercy, but the knights didn't respond. Lillian didn't show mercy either. Anyone who bullied her brother was unforgivable to Lillian's sister. But after thinking about it, the young lady decided to let Luoya's choice. The black-haired boy just recovered from the shock of seeing the army that seemed to come out of a history book. After thinking for a while, Roja shook his head gently. It's still too early. The black-haired young man clasped Lillian's hand, trying to comfort his sister who was brimming with killing intent. Unexpectedly, not only did Lillian not show any dissatisfaction, but she even blushed and looked at the young man with eyes full of love. Then forget it. Saying so, he waved his hand gently, and the sound of the horn immediately stopped. The knights also lowered their swords pointing at the crowd. The atmosphere in the mansion relaxed a little. Santos secretly breathed a sigh of relief, but this time it was Luoya who smiled. Mr. Santos, thank you for your kindness this time. I'm very satisfied with this banquet, but I don't think it's the right time for negotiation. What do you think? Perhaps that is the case. Glancing at the tall knights nearby, Santos answered with an ugly expression. Santos didn't know where this army came from, but it was obvious that they didn't participate in the previous battle, which meant that this was a fresh army. Anyone who suddenly gained new strength would display it on the battlefield to gain a greater advantage. Negotiation would definitely be after that. That was why Santos didn't speak nonsense, and Luoya didn't waste any time either. Well then, goodbye. Have fun. After saying those words with a smile that made Santos's cheeks twitch, the black-haired young man bid farewell and left. On both sides of the carpet, the tall knights lined up in 2 rows, forming a long corridor with their lances. Luoya and Lillian walked through the corridor hand in hand, heading out of the mansion. Looking at the back of the two of them, Santos's face was flushed red, and he gritted his teeth. But then, as if he thought of something, his expression calmed down, and he even showed a mocking smile. Enjoy yourselves, in the last moments of your lives. Outside the door, Lillian's magnificent army retreated and disappeared one by one. Luoya looked at this scene with indescribable shock in his heart. All the armies, regardless of whether it was the cavalry or the infantry, were the trump cards of the ancient Austin Empire from different eras. And now, these warriors who didn't compete with each other in their lives were gathered together to protect the queen who brought them out of history. Although Luoya had vaguely sensed Lillian's strength when they confronted each other, he never thought that she would be this strong. If Roja could be said to be someone who had developed and surpassed the foundation of the Akate family's bloodline and origin substance, then Lillian was the chosen one who had combined the Akate family's bloodline and the origin substance of the Akate family. To a certain extent, she was a miracle. Chapter 302. The moment their lips touched, Luoya's mind went blank. Logically speaking, playing with fire with words shouldn't have been too much of a provocation. The black-haired young man's greatest wish was to calm Lillian down, but the result was far beyond his expectations. Lillian's kiss was clumsy. It was obvious that she didn't have any experience in kissing him. It was purely an act of excitement. However, when it landed on Luoya's lips, a strange feeling suddenly arose in the young man's body. It was his brain overheating and the impulse to get closer. It was obvious that this impulse wasn't unique to him. Lillian was driven by this almost instinctive action and couldn't help but kiss him. The intense kiss lasted for quite a while before Luoya finally snapped back to his senses and grabbed the young woman's wrist. Huff, huff, senior sister. Wake up. Luoya, calm down, senior sister. We're still in the car. Luoya's reminder caused Lillian's purple eyes to regain some clarity. After a momentary daze, Lillian's cheeks immediately turned as red as blood. No, I understand, senior sister. I understand. Calm down. The black-haired young man comforted her while hugging the young woman tightly. Feeling the warm embrace, Lillian, who was leaning on the young man's shoulder, calmed down slightly. In the narrow space, the two of them didn't move at all. Their breathing gradually calmed down. Senior sister, are you feeling better? Yeah, about what happened just now. I'm sorry. I was too excited, it's okay. We've never met blood relatives before. Before Lillian could finish speaking, Luoya hurriedly comforted her. Luoya naturally wouldn't take advantage of being kissed by Her Highness the Empress for nothing. However, he had to admit that Lillian's kiss was very childish. It felt like a chick pecking at rice. It even felt a little itchy. Wait, if that's the case, don't tell me, senior sister, have you kissed anyone before? Roja thought of a key question and asked softly. Lillian's body stiffened, and after a long silence, she shook her head in embarrassment. I knew it. Is it very uncomfortable? Do you hate it? No, not at all. Faced with Lillian's question, Luoya resolutely denied it. He felt the young lady's body and even felt as if he was dreaming. In fact, Luoya had this feeling ever since he learned that Lillian was his blood relative, and it was even more intense now. Although Lillian's first kiss was only a light peck, it was already unprecedented intimacy for this ice beauty. If this matter were to spread, it would probably drive countless suitors in the Austin Empire crazy. Although I've seen records of blood relatives having feelings of closeness, senior sister, isn't our effect a little too strong? Perhaps it's because there are differences in the kinship between different bloodlines. Lillian explained as she recalled the almost greedy feeling in her body. Luoya nodded in agreement. Indeed, the probability of two Akot family bloodlines appearing in one generation was too low. It seemed normal for her to be unusually excited, but this was too much. Luoya sighed as he thought about this. Other people's bodies were controlled by their thoughts, but Luoya and Lillian's bodies were affected by their bloodlines. The two of them couldn't do anything about this situation. It was as if this was fate that they couldn't defy. After a long silence, their breathing calmed down. Luoya then recalled an important piece of information. Chapter 303. Lillian's arrival was generally smooth, and it did not arouse any unusual reaction from the Saint Heroes Society. After all, Luoya now had a group of fanatics around him who thought that he was the Saint's envoy. It could be said that he had absolute authority. If Luoya said that there was no problem, then there was no problem. Not only that, but unlike Luoya, Lillian was quite revered as soon as she arrived. One of the reasons was naturally that the believers of the Saint Heroes Society did not know the true identity of the two, and the other reason was Lillian's strength and achievements. Wouldn't they be fools if they didn't want a level 3 source ranker? Moreover, Lillian's level 3 source ranker was completely different from ordinary extraordinaires of the same level in terms of strength. Last night, in order to find Luoya, Lillian's various legions of the ancient Austin Empire almost pierced the Brotherhood of Redemption's ass full of holes, greatly relieving the pressure on the Saint Heroes Society. This kind of individual achievement was simply appalling. As for their identity, Luoya and Lillian decided to pretend to be a couple instead of siblings for the time being after serious consideration. The main reason was that although both of them looked good, their styles were too different. Luoya was the gentle type, while Lillian was a cold beauty with completely different eye colors. On the other hand, setting them as a couple could also prevent Lillian from being questioned because she did not understand the Saint Heroes Society. This was undoubtedly much more convenient. The Saint Heroes Society was still very tolerant of the marriage of believers. Although they were not as indulgent as the Brotherhood of Redemption, there was no problem with having a couple. After all, this was also a way to attract new believers. As Lillian's appearance and temperament were too noble, and her strength was far beyond the level that should be at her age, she was once thought to be a child of a great aristocrat somewhere. Traveling alone to find Luoya was too similar to eloping, so no one dared to ask her surname. This could be said to have saved Luoya a lot of trouble, but it could only be said that the truth was often more exaggerated than people's imagination. Lillian's background was far from being summarized by a great aristocrat. Luoya thought so and turned his head to look at the girl. The latter tilted her head slightly in a questioning manner. Her gentle and somewhat cute look made Luoya's heart skip a beat. "Senior sister. You look really good in a gown." Luoya changed the topic at the last minute in order to conceal his feelings. Unexpectedly, Lillian's cheeks blushed slightly as if she was very happy. The atmosphere between the two of them became more harmonious as a result. Both of them had a strange feeling in their hearts as if they were a real couple. Outsiders would naturally find it hard to tell if it was real or fake. Due to the complete breakdown of the negotiations, the Saint Heroes Association immediately strengthened their defense work after Luoya returned. It was almost certain that a fierce battle was inevitable. However, unlike before, Luoya did not want to participate in the next fierce battle. After successfully meeting up with Lillian, Luoya's biggest goal in the Saint Heroes Assembly was achieved. All that was left was to wait for the Academy to contact him. During this time, Luoya also had time to check on his system. When Luoya saw the score, he was a little surprised. After all, in his opinion, he did not do anything significant during this period of time. He didn't even kill any monsters. Although he met up with Lillian, it was mostly due to Lillian herself. After meeting up with her, she even helped him out. But this matter shouldn't have increased his score by so much. So, could it be that something else had happened? For example, the pendant that he sent to the academy. Could it have caused some changes? With this thought in mind, Luo Ye's eyes lit up. He used the score to deduce a piece of good news. But considering the situation, Luo Ye reckoned that the academy's sage society and the others would not act too quickly. After all, they were neither relatives nor friends. In this situation, even if they were members of the sage society, they would probably have to consider before taking action. During this period of time, Luo Ye and Lillian were waiting, but at the same time, it was also time for them to rest. Lillian had been fighting for 2 days and 2 nights in a row, so she naturally needed to rest. Luo Ye was also frozen last night due to the side effects of the touch of frigid earth. As soon as they saw each other today, he immediately felt exhausted. After arranging everything, Luo Ye immediately brought Lillian back to their room to rest. Now that the two of them were a couple, it was naturally impossible for them to stay in separate rooms. But even if they could, they didn't want to be apart. The two of them who had just found each other after being separated emotionally had some repercussions. It was even more so when it came to safety. Now that the two of them were spies in the enemy camp, no matter what they did in the future, staying together was the best plan. Lillian was naturally aware of this, but the two of them had a rare argument over where to sleep. I'm the elder sister, so you'll sleep on the bed. I'm the man, so of course you'll sleep on the bed. Both of their reasons were too good, so they refused to give in to each other. But in the end, the result was very harmonious. As they were in the enemy camp, after some discussion, they decided to take turns sleeping. One slept while the other guarded. This way, there wasn't much to argue about. After being frozen last night due to the side effects, Luo Ye technically hadn't slept for 5 days. Even though he was an extraordinary, his body couldn't take it after experiencing so many events. On the other hand, Lillian had been sleeping for 2 days after entering the historical fragment, so Luo Ye slept first tonight. From the time he returned to his room after dinner until close to midnight, Luo Ye slept soundly under the protection of Lillian. The sense of security from having a loved one by his side gave him a good rest. As for Lillian, she also had a good time during this period. Looking at the young man sleeping soundly on the bed, the black-haired girl couldn't help but smile. Lillian was feeling wonderful now. It was the feeling of suddenly gaining someone important. In terms of feelings, it was almost like a young girl who suddenly fell in love. Just thinking about it made her happy. Just seeing it made her want to get close to it. Just listening to the sound of his breathing made her heart feel warm. This was a feeling she had never felt before. It made her feel as if she had found a treasure. But just like sugar, an appropriate amount was fine. Too much would lead to obesity. Lillian also knew that she couldn't look at him too much. Otherwise, her bloodline would probably cause her to lose control of her feelings. After letting out a sigh, she reluctantly left the room. Her Royal Highness the Empress waited quietly in the small reception room outside the room. Chapter 304. In front of the throne, the beautiful witch was holding a corolla as she looked at the young man in front of her with a radiant smile on her face. How about it? Why don't you give it a try? The witch's persuasive voice entered Luo Ye's ears, followed by the rising desire in his heart. The black-haired young man looked at the corolla in Altatia's hand in a daze, but his golden eyes quickly returned to normal. No need. Thank you for your kind intentions, but I'm not interested. The young man's face sank slightly as a sense of danger rose in his heart while looking at the witch's reply. Altatia pouted when she heard his reply, then sighed a moment later. I've been collecting it for a long time, don't you think it's very compatible with you? A crown or something. The crown is my origin substance, but it's not my will. Roja said as he stood up and stepped away from Altatia's throne. He looked at the witch and said softly. Altacia, don't tempt me with this anymore, I'm not interested in being a king. Sigh, as expected. After a moment of silence, the white-haired witch sighed as she gently put the corolla on her head, then leaned forward towards the young man as if to close the distance between them for a kiss, forcing Luoya to raise his body slightly. How distressing, is it because you've witnessed too many ups and downs? It's been so many years since Xia left, even we have given up, but you're still clinging to your duties. But forget it, I more or less expected this outcome. Altacia straightened her body, seemingly giving up on tempting the black-haired young man with the throne. Luoya stared at the witch in front of him and suddenly said. Altacia, what's your purpose? Purpose, I've said it before, I hope that Sir Hero can let that girl be my host, that's not the truth, at least not all of it. Luoya interrupted the witch's words and calmly stated his conclusion. Altacia blinked her eyes, tilted her head and asked curiously. Why do you say that? The reason why witches are called witches is because they can't be understood by ordinary people. At first, I thought you wanted to resurrect in the real world, but after thinking about it, is this really the wish of an existence like the Queen of Witches? Under Luoya's words and gaze, Altacia was first surprised, then the corners of her mouth gradually curled up. She seemed to enjoy listening to Luoya's questioning, her narrowed eyes filled with joy. Isn't it too hasty to judge based on rumors? Does the witch have to resort to trickery? Stereotypes aren't good. Stereotype? Altacia is the real one, isn't she? She rigidly thinks that her image, actions, expression, and tone that men like can make me like her. That's why she acted so vividly. Why did he say that? Can't I be a demoness that's lovable? Altacia, you've never called me by my name, have you? When Luoya asked this question, the white-haired witch was slightly taken aback, then the corners of her mouth uncontrollably curled up. Luoya said calmly. You didn't call me by my name and have always referred to me as Sir Hero. Actually, it's because you know that I'm using a fake name. As for the reason, it's because you've already verified it when I said it, right? The young man's pupils constricted as he stared at the witch, his tone was as cold as ice. What did you use? Curse? Or some other curse technique? Oh, really, Sir Hero, you're thinking too badly of Altacia. I didn't use any curse technique. Facing Luoya's furious gaze, the white-haired witch's cheeks flushed red. She pouted as though she was angry, but she also seemed to be very happy. I only used the name Luo-yi to try a curse technique to see through one's heart, but it didn't work at all. See through one's heart? That's right, even I can't see through the crown. To me, who can always know what others are thinking, you're like an unknown creature. Wouldn't I have no clue how to deal with you at this time? Altacia's temperament changed slightly as she spoke, gradually revealing her true nature. Her innocent and cute expression was slightly restrained, turning into a rational but excited smile. Chapter 305. Looking at the alarm clock on the table, Luoya tidied up his clothes and sighed helplessly. According to the agreement, the two of them would change shifts at midnight. However, the clock had already passed midnight, but there was still no one knocking on the door. Lillian didn't wake him up. The black-haired young man recalled the experience in his dream. Although Altacia was troublesome, it was good that she woke him up on time. Otherwise, Luoya might have slept until the next day. After tidying up his appearance, the young man walked out of the room and saw Her Royal Highness sitting outside elegantly and dutifully guarding the room. Lillian's purple eyes flashed with surprise when she saw Luoya waking up. According to her observation not long ago, Luoya should be sleeping soundly. What's wrong? Why did you suddenly wake up? Because it's time. Senior, why didn't you wake me up? My level is higher than yours. Besides, what's wrong with giving my time to my younger brother? Hearing Lillian's matter-of-fact words, Luoya supported his forehead with his hand and felt helpless. Senior, go to sleep immediately. But, preserve the state of high-level combat strength. This is the foundation of the strategy class. Although it's a little depressing to say this, my combat strength is limited here. There are probably many things that I need Senior's help with. I understand. As if hearing that she was needed, Lillian's mood improved instantly. She obediently went to sleep. After stretching and sitting down, Luoya began to prepare for tonight's battle. That's right. There was another reason why Luoya went to sleep first. According to the movement patterns of the black-armored soldiers and black-clothed clergy, the fierce battle between the two cults would usually take place in the middle of the night. This way, even if there was a battle, Luoya, who was awake, could handle it. Lillian didn't have to worry about it. However, the young man didn't expect that despite all his calculations, he had miscalculated the situation tonight. Not only was the situation urgent, but the front line tonight was calm and peaceful. What's going on? Could it be that Lillian's participation has caused the enemy to be wary and not dare to attack easily? Luoya couldn't understand this calmness and felt slightly uneasy. While he was thinking, he suddenly heard a scream from the room. Luoya. Upon hearing Lillian's call, the young man widened his eyes and rushed into the bedroom in a flash. But to his surprise, there were no enemies in the room. Only Lillian sat up on the bed and panted heavily. Did he have a nightmare? Looking at the girl with purple eyes trembling uneasily, Luoya, who had discovered the truth, was slightly taken aback, and immediately blamed himself for his carelessness. Too many things had happened in the past few days, causing him to neglect Lillian's mental state. Before entering the historical fragment, Lillian had been traumatized by the tragic death of her friend. After that, not only did the series of shocking events fail to calm her mind, but she became even more unstable because of Luoya's disappearance. It was fine if she could control herself rationally when she was awake, but it was normal for her to have nightmares when she fell asleep. Thinking of this, Luoya felt pity for her and hurriedly said, "Senior, calm down. I'm here." Luoya. Lillian's body trembled slightly as she looked at the young man who walked to her bedside and softly comforted her. She was stunned for a moment before she opened her arms and hugged him tightly. She greedily inhaled the young man's scent. After a while, the black-haired girl who had replenished her Luoya finally calmed down. Seeing this, Luoya moved a chair and sat in front of the bed. He held the girl's hand and coaxed Lillian to sleep. "Senior, I'll be right here and not go anywhere. Sleep well." After hearing Luoya's words, Lillian, who felt strangely embarrassed, hid half of her face under the blanket. However, she couldn't bear to let go of Luoya. After hesitating for a long time, she could only nod silently. But after lying down on the bed, her purple eyes kept peeking at Luoya. Chapter 306. Estrella Ald. When the name came into sight, Luoya's brain couldn't help but turn blank. Ard? Is it that Ard? Thinking of the Eagle of Shadow during the ancient Austin Empire, the original family of the Akkad family, the black-haired boy was stunned for a moment and couldn't help but feel excited. Luoya never thought that in the 600 years of the Third Era, this ancient family that could not be found in records and only existed by word of mouth actually still had members alive. If this was the case, Cade's words made sense. No wonder, Scholar was a core member of the Twilight Sage Association. She was completely one of their own. As a member of the Ard family and a scholar of the Twilight Sage Association, Estrid must have more information than Luoya could imagine. At the thought of this, the black-haired boy had an impulse to fly over immediately. No, I have to calm down. Seeing the name of the ancestor, Luoya was excited for a moment before returning to his senses. Thinking of the situation of the Holy Heroes Association, he frowned and began to think seriously about how to implement this plan. Going to the north side of the academy tomorrow night was not a problem, but Luoya, who had the status of a holy envoy, sneaked out like this, which made him a little unwilling. The Brotherhood of Redemption didn't make a move tonight. The only possibility was that they were accumulating strength, and the outbreak was likely to be tomorrow night. If Luoya escaped at this juncture, then the Holy Heroes Association, which had lost its support, would be quickly defeated. At that time, the Brotherhood of Redemption would launch a large-scale attack on the city. Thinking so, Luoya thought, and the corners of his mouth gradually hooked up. The next morning, when Lillian's hazy consciousness gradually woke up, the first thing she felt was the warmth of her right hand. This is... Yes, it's Luoya. He's still here. The girl, who had just woken up, remembered the somewhat embarrassing scene last night and couldn't help but feel a little shy. However, she was a little happy that Luoya still stayed by her bed all night. Logically speaking, after Lillian fell asleep last night, there was no need for Luoya to hold her hand like this. However, the young man did not let go of her hand as promised. This was something that Lillian did not expect. It almost meant that Lillian was very important to Luoya. The warm emotions in her heart filled Lillian with motivation. The moment she opened her eyes, she felt as if the world was glowing. Lillian, who had never experienced something like this before, was at a loss for what to do. At the same time, she was intoxicated. Senior sister, you're awake. Good morning. Good morning. In response to the young man's greeting, Lillian smiled faintly and replied with a good morning. However, she quickly recalled that she had just woken up and couldn't help covering her face. Senior. Don't look. I need to tidy up a little. Lillian's cheeks blushed slightly as she said this. Luoya was taken aback when he heard this. Then, he suddenly understood and left. Originally, Lillian had to bathe and wash her body every morning. But now, there were no servants in the castle, and many functions were damaged. The princess had no choice but to settle for the next best thing. After dressing up properly in front of the mirror, Lillian appeared in front of the young man again. Luoya glanced at the young lady who had hardly changed. He could only sigh at Lillian's natural beauty and then told her about the news from last night. According to the contents of the letter, Estrella and Antonio seemed to be guarding a certain curse vessel according to the orders of the Sage Society. In the context of the invasion of the mutants, the curse vessel that the scholar and others were guarding must be very important. If Luoya guessed correctly, this was probably the target of the Brotherhood of Redemption's rebellion. And judging from the time, the mystery of the destruction of the Sage Society that Luoya had been exploring was also likely to be related to this. After listening to the situation, Lillian nodded thoughtfully. But then, she was stunned by Luoya's other words. Madame Estrella is my ancestor. Well, strictly speaking, she is the ancestor of the Akot family. But since Senior has the bloodline of the Akot family, then your ancestors must also be related to the Ald family. Bloodlines wouldn't appear out of thin air. Lillian was different from most of the people in the family. The only possibility was that she had atavism. Charlot was a good example, and Lillian should be in the same situation. However, it would probably take some time for the princess to accept that her bloodline wasn't that of the royal family. After informing Luoya of the necessary information, he didn't disturb Senior anymore. After breakfast, Luoya began to gather the members of the Saint Heroes Society for a battle meeting. Chapter 307. A meteor fell from Leinster City. A few seconds after the flash was released, everyone reacted to it, be it north or south of the city, inside or outside the academy. It was a bright white meteor that seemed to contain endless radiance, beautiful and holy. However, what it contained was not warmth, but the coldness and despair that led people to death. Senior. Everything happened too quickly. In the next second when Luoya noticed the shining light, the light had dyed everything nearby white. In the distance, an old man in a black robe looked at the place where the meteor fell, his face emotionless. Plist Max Hill, this was a name that was praised in this era. When people mentioned him, the first thing that came to mind was the image of a wise and gentle old man. The followers of Bologna called him the saint, the scholars hailed him as the wisest chairman in history, and the extraordinary people called him the king of curses. Over the countless years, Priester had received too many honors and shouldered a considerable amount of responsibility. But today, as he looked at the falling light, the old man's face was no longer warm and gentle. Instead, it was cold and solemn. It had been 100 years since he fell into the hands of the Savior. After 100 years of planning, Plist was finally about to achieve his goal, but at this crucial moment, an unexpected person came to Leinster. The Ackett family was a family that could not be carelessly handed down, especially their bloodline awakeners. For these chosen children who bore heavy burdens, anything was possible. This was the conclusion that Plist had given them over the long years. Whether it was the insurmountable gap in levels or the unbreakable iron rules, nothing was absolute before them. Their possibilities were far beyond the comprehension of ordinary people. It had been so since ancient times, and this time was no exception. Plist's slightly dim eyes looked into the distance. Under his attack, the entire area trembled, but the two targets did not turn into ashes. Where the light dissipated, what appeared was a huge skeleton and a giant black serpent that surrounded the two people. At this moment, the skeleton had mostly melted in the light, while the giant black serpent was almost shattered. Still, it had to be said that even without souls, these two curse power constructs had indeed protected their master. In the gradually dissipating form of the ancient god, the black-haired youth spat out blood. However, the pain of his body tearing apart did not diminish his will to fight. Instead, it made his will as cold as ice and unshakable. Frozen earth. Amidst the murmurs, white mist rushed out of the youth's body without holding back and tore at the old man who was holding a staff. At the same time, the deep sound of horns echoed from all directions. A powerful surge of curse power that had never been seen before erupted from Lillian's body. With Priest as the center, countless warriors walked out of the radiance and began their charge. Amidst the deafening battle cries, countless warriors stepped out of the radiance and began their charge. The heavy-armored legions with lions painted on their shields, the blue-armored knights with lances pointed forward, and the archers with strange mechanical curses on their arms, the most elite legions in human history began a joint encirclement under the Queen's command. Amidst the piercing sound, arrows of destruction imbued with elemental magic converged into a colorful cloud and fell from the sky. Beside Lillian, thousands of red-robed spellcasters held up their long staffs. The light of their curses was as bright as the stars. Obscure incantations echoed in their mouths as they worked together to create an army of curses that far exceeded their individual strength. After being attacked for a moment, the two of them who had a tacit understanding unleashed their killer moves almost at the same time. There was no other reason other than that the enemy gave them too much pressure. Amidst the frost, the youth's expression was unprecedentedly ugly. In front of him, Lillian shielded him behind her as if she was protecting him. However, her clenched hands were trembling slightly. Both of them could feel that the other party did not use his full strength in the blow just now, and that was indeed the case. That's right. The blow that shook the earth like a meteor was just a greeting from Plist. Even if he was destined to kill the other party and had even rushed here specifically for this, Plist did not like to ambush the younger generation. Giving the other party the right to fight back with all his might was his reservedness as the king of curses, just like now. Under the moonlight, amidst the heavy encirclement of thousands of soldiers and horses, the horns of the barracks continued to sound. The earth trembled under the hooves of the horses, and the sky was covered by arrows and frost. However, in the face of all this, the black-robed old man remained unmoved. He looked at the young man and girl in the distance with his weathered eyes. After a long time, he only let out a sigh. How powerful! The heartfelt praise came from the mouth of the king of curses. Luoya was familiar with history. How could the knowledgeable Plist not know the origin of these soldiers? With this powerful army and that strange frost, even a powerhouse of the second level of the source rank would be easily annihilated by the combined forces of these two young men. If it was before the dark days, he would definitely protect these children with all his might. Unfortunately, it was all too late. Under the overwhelming attacks, Priest's body suddenly burst out with layers of light. The dark clouds of elemental arrows turned into ashes, and the frost that covered the ground was also dispersed. The old cursemancer raised his long staff, and the holy statue on the staff suddenly seemed to come alive. The half-body banshee opened her arms and opened her mouth to let out a call of death. Cough. Not good. Luoya, who was coughing out a mouthful of blood, stared at the staff in the old man's hand. His expression changed drastically, and he reflexively thought of a holy weapon. Staff of the Dead Man's Voice. It was a holy weapon described in the records of the scholar country. Legend had it that the cursed soul of a banshee resided in the staff. After it was activated, it would carry out a large-scale indiscriminate curse. It had once reaped tens of thousands of lives on the battlefield of the mutants. The terrifying weapon in the records flashed across his mind. The next moment, the cruel reality proved his thoughts. Within 100 meters of the old man, the knights that were charging towards Priest were falling to the ground in droves amidst the shrill cries. Be it man or horse, all of their presence vanished amidst the call of death. The black-haired girl abruptly widened her eyes, but after a brief moment of hesitation, she steeled her heart and continued to command the army to charge towards the old man. She must buy time for the legion of cursemancers behind her to cast their spells. For that, she would pay any price. Determined, Lillian began to stall for time with all her might. The brave soldiers of the legion charged at the enemy dauntlessly. Layers of corpses piled up. The scene was unprecedentedly tragic. However, not a single one of them could get within 10 meters of Plist. Only the huge skeleton was not afraid of the terrifying curse. However, the Gulan Daer that had lost its soul could not pose a threat to the enemy. The frost and the rain of arrows were still being dispersed by the light. The battle cries shook the surroundings. Every minute and every second of the battle felt like a year. Until the chanting of the thousands of people stopped abruptly, and the inexplicable pressure in the sky was so strong that it could not be ignored. Only then did Lillian's purple eyes lit up again. Divine strike of the Legion curse. After a long period of preparation, it was finally completed. Chapter 308. He would die. Looking at Priest who was walking towards him, Luoya instinctively sensed his end. The severe injuries caused the young man's vision to turn black. He was about to collapse, but in the next moment, a hand supported his body. It was the girl whose mouth was also stained with blood. In the face of such a terrifying enemy, Lillian did not retreat in the face of danger. Instead, she faced the terrifying torrent of curses and walked to the front. Luoya may not have reached level 3 of source rank, but I have. The black-haired girl said as she looked at the young man who was unable to move and forced a smile. The next moment, she opened her hand towards the sky. Golden shards flowed out from her palm and landed on the remaining soldiers and the spellcasters. This is the shard of the crown. The young man whose vision was blurred thought with his remaining ability to think. Then, he heard Lillian's order. Stop him. With a simple command, the knights who were bathed in golden radiance and had broken through to third source roared. The spellcasters' spellcasting ripples also multiplied by several times. Even so, Plist remained unmoved as he stared at the seething warriors. In front of him, the number of enemies actually did not make much of a difference. What's the point of a useless struggle? Perhaps it is indeed meaningless. But, Lord of Curses, I am this child's elder sister. Under the heavy pressure that seemed to freeze her blood, the black-haired girl touched the young man's cheek with her trembling hand. The surging flow of curses blew her black hair. Her purple eyes narrowed because of the pain. However, when she raised her head again, there was only calmness and determination left on the girl's face. I'm standing up. This is my meaning. False feelings will only lead to death. The fallen Lord of Curses did not have any feelings for the girl's feelings. He said so and then raised his finger. What followed was a torrent of destruction. That was the light of destruction that could completely fill one's vision. It was a spell that the Lord of Curses casually cast. However, its power was far beyond the full-strength attack of an ordinary level 2 of source rank. In the face of this terrifying attack, Lillian quickly retreated. Even so, she could not escape. 10 cities, the black-haired girl murmured softly at the critical moment. Her purple eyes lit up like candlelight, and as the origin substance vibrated, 3 different city walls rose from the ground in response to her summons. The tall walls and deep city walls acted like shields, instantly blocking in front of the girl. In the distance, Pleist's eyes widened in shock. The 10 cities was something that could only be summoned by the kingdom, origin substance of the Achaemen tribe. There were 10 fortresses that had existed in human history. They gathered the hopes of the people during the Age of Chaos and were the strongest defensive force. They were also Lillian's trump card. Under the protection of these legendary fortresses, the pursuing white light was indeed blocked outside the city. I didn't expect you to be able to summon such a thing. You're actually a mixed blood of the Ace-Man family. The black-robed old man widened his eyes in surprise. After a while, he shook his head. However, even if it's a legendary stronghold summoned by a level 3 source ranker, it won't be able to stop me. Pleist sighed. In the next moment, he raised his hand for the second time. The impact of the curse power that was comparable to divine punishment was released once again. This time, it was several times more powerful than the first time. Under this attack, the warriors who charged at him were reduced to ashes. The legendary fortresses also collapsed one by one. Lillian, who was retreating rapidly, was as pale as a sheet. However, as she felt the young man who was almost unconscious in her arms, the girl's heart was only filled with the promise she once made. I'll definitely protect you well. The feelings in her heart turned into the desire to protect. The black-haired girl who had made up her mind clenched 2 of her fingers. As her purple eyes contracted, she suddenly exerted her strength. Crack! Amidst the sound of finger bones breaking, the 3 fortresses that had collapsed and disappeared under Pleist's attack suddenly burst out with a blinding radiance. The 4th city, Fort Sapadro, and the 5th city, Sequogen, rushed out of the ground one after another. At the same time, 7 blue-robed sorcerers appeared out of thin air beside Lillian. They chanted at the same time. A strong wave of curse power spread out from the city, causing Pleist's expression to darken. So that's how it is. It's not to stop me, but to buy time and opportunity for the transfer curse? Pleist's eyes shone brighter as he spoke. After Luoya, Lillian's performance had completely stunned the King of Curses. 10 cities. That was an absolute defense that no external curse could harm or affect the people inside before it was destroyed. Leaving the first 3 cities aside, it was already a miracle that she could summon the 5th city as a level 3 source ranker. She was calm, decisive, and exceptionally talented. Even when she was heavily injured and in despair, she was still searching for a chance. I didn't expect that there would be 2 outstanding Akkad bloodline users in the same era. The King of Curses sighed. However, in the next moment, a majestic killing intent enveloped in aurora and lightning came towards him. Chapter 309. On the city wall of St. Freya Academy, the young man's figure fell out of thin air amidst the flickering light. Cough! Luoya, who fell to the ground, coughed out a mouthful of blood. After experiencing severe injuries and teleportation, the young man was on the verge of death. But when he thought of Lillian, who sent him here, Luoya couldn't close his eyes and faint. He didn't come here because he had given up hope, but to pursue it. A chilly wind blew at a corner of the city wall. There was no one nearby, but the moment Luoya entered the enchantment, he felt that she was looking at him. Thinking of this, Luoya no longer hesitated. He endured the pain and pulled out his dagger, aimed at his heart, and stabbed it. But before the blade touched his body, a rainbow light suddenly appeared and blocked the blade. "What are you doing?" The angry female voice sounded just as Luoya expected. The black-haired young man raised his head and looked at his ancestor, who he forced out with her death. He knew that he had to persuade her to save Lillian as soon as possible. And the first thing he had to know was the reason why she didn't save Lillian. The location of their battle wasn't far from St. Freya Academy. This distance was nothing in the eyes of a top powerhouse who had lived for hundreds of years. There must be a special reason why she didn't save Lillian. "Why didn't you do it?" Seeing the young man staring at her like this, Estrid couldn't bear it. She pondered for a moment and said with tears in her eyes, "Child, I'm sorry about what happened to your sister. But due to special reasons, I can only do it once. I can't defeat Pulist outside the city. I only have a chance of winning in the city." "I see." After hearing the woman's explanation, Luoya's voice was unusually calm. The next moment, the black-haired young man reached into his pocket and a sparkling gem appeared in his hand. The moment the gem left the box, the faint sound of the wind blew past their ears like the whisper of death. The chaotic air mass began to flow faster, colliding with the gem and greedily seeking air from the outside world. Estrid widened her eyes and Luoya stated his condition. "Save her, Pulist. I'll kill him." Upon hearing Luoya's words, Estrid's pupils shrank abruptly, but the young man who was covered in cuts and bruises seemed unusually calm. Plist was indeed powerful, but in this chaotic Leinster, there was something he didn't know about yet that could defeat him, and that was the 6 calamities that the Saint Heroes Guild had prepared to kill him. The 6 calamities was a calamity that devoured everything and annihilated countless civilizations. Even the King of Curses, who stood at the pinnacle of mankind, could not escape the fate of the wind summoners who slaughtered countless long-lived species. Absorbing the egg required time and energy, but releasing this ancient monster to perish together with the enemy was more than enough for Luoya at any given moment. Estrid stared blankly at Luoya in front of her. She understood his intention, and the young man, who had turned his life into a bargaining chip, formally made his request. "If there's no other choice, I'm willing to take the King of Curses with me. But, please save Senior Lillian. Ancestor, please agree to my only request." Upon hearing Luoya's words, Estrid's expression kept changing. Her pupils met the young man's golden pupils and she could feel his unshakable determination. After struggling for a moment, the black-haired woman gradually calmed down and made her choice. "I understand. You are all brave children." The black-haired woman sighed, and at the next moment, her body released a rainbow light. "She'll be fine, I promise." Leaving those words behind, Estrid vanished into thin air and headed to the battlefield. Success. Looking at the empty city wall after Estrid left, Luoya heaved a sigh of relief. He extended his trembling hand and gently wiped away the tears that still hung on his face. He suddenly felt a sense of peace that he had never felt before. Lillian won't die. Luoya felt that there was no better news in the world than this. But at the same time, intense anger and unyielding fighting spirit ignited in his heart. Although Luoya persuaded Estrid with the reason of perishing together, in fact, he didn't have such thoughts at all. Lillian took such a huge risk to save him and she didn't want him to die in this place. Besides, Luoya believed that there must be a way out of this situation. The historical fragment was a test, but it wasn't a dead end. Luoya had grasped the 2 most crucial keys and the rest was just information. He believed that when he completed the last piece of the puzzle, there would be a way to take revenge on Pulist. Chapter 310. The term future was a very broad term. It could mean the future like tomorrow, or it could also mean an abstract concept like the future. But when it was preceded by the word human, it would be exceptionally heavy. What exactly does the future of human refer to? With such questions echoing in his mind, his hazy consciousness gradually became clear. Everything that happened before he fainted flashed across his mind. When he woke up again, Luoya was already in a tidy bedroom. Blinking his eyes gently, the black-haired young man got up abruptly. Where is this place? Covering his body that was still in pain, Luoya observed the room he was in. He realized that this should be an unoccupied bedroom. There were no personal belongings, and everything was standard furniture. Is this a temporary ward? Such a thought flashed across his mind. But before Luoya could shout, a little elf emitting light suddenly descended from above. After circling around him, it flew towards the direction of the door. Is it going to lead the way for me? Understanding the elf's intention, Luoya got down from the bed and followed the elf's guidance out of the door. Realizing that there was no one in the corridor, he walked through the slightly gloomy building and soon arrived at the central hall. As the elf flew up, Luoya looked up and saw a figure floating above the hall. It was a black-haired woman in a long dress. She was also the one who Luoya asked for help last night. But unlike yesterday, Estrid seemed to be slightly exhausted. Perhaps sensing the young man's gaze, the black-haired woman opened her eyes and blinked in surprise. Can you walk now? It seems that you've recovered well. The woman said as she descended from the sky. Luoya was stunned for a moment before he anxiously asked about the situation after he fainted. Estrid smiled faintly and slowly explained the aftermath of the battle last night. After Luoya fainted, Lillian was successfully rescued by Estrid, who rushed to the scene. Estrid and Plist met on the spot and fought on the spot. As a result, most of Leinster was now in ruins and both sides were recuperating. Originally, if we fought in the academy, I could use the dream realization enchantment to protect the nearby buildings. But this time, it was outside the range. Dream realization? Yes, that's the ability to materialize dreams. It can cover reality. No matter how much damage is done within the barrier, everything will return to normal after the barrier disappears. The wide-eyed Luoya finally understood why there were no traces of this battle at St. Freya Academy. Then the young man asked where Lillian was, and the answer was that the girl had fallen asleep after receiving treatment. After hearing the news, Luoya was finally relieved. Seeing the two so loving, Estrella smiled. However, to her surprise, Luoya didn't leave immediately. Instead, she asked her a key question. Lord Ancestor, with your strength, what are you guarding here? The black-haired young man looked at Estrid's question, his heart full of confusion. Since Estrid was able to fight with the Lord of Curses and retreat unscathed, she must be a powerhouse of the same level, which was a level 1 source level powerhouse. What kind of thing was it that it needed a level 1 source level powerhouse to protect it? In the face of Luoya's question, the rainbow-eyed beauty fell into silence. After hesitating for a long time, Estrella sighed and said, I'm guarding the relic of the ancient three-race alliance, Dream of Chaos. Dream of Chaos? The three-race alliance? Yes, the three-race alliance was an alliance formed by angels, dragons, and highland elves to fight against the great beings who had gone mad in ancient times. Dream of Chaos is a dream creation born from the joint efforts of the three races. In fact, it has another name, Dream of the Savior. The Savior? Luoya, who heard the familiar word, asked in surprise. Estrella nodded and told the truth about guarding it for hundreds of years. The Savior was one of the great beings who surpassed the gods in ancient times. He once led a glorious era. However, just like the alternation of light and shadow, his fall caused countless catastrophes. The decline of many ancient races was greatly related to him. However, even if he fell into a deep sleep, the existence of the Savior still caused a huge problem. The Savior's deep sleep was not deep. He would unconsciously lead people to fall and increase his believers. Every few hundred years, he would appear in a state of near awakening. The duration of this state was long and short, and the intensity was different. However, every time, it would cause a bloody storm. The depraved and crazy murmurs echoed in the depths of the mind. The dragons tore at each other, and the angels drew their swords against each other. Even the Highland elves, who were the least affected, inevitably went crazy. In order to get rid of this once in a few hundred years nightmare, the three most powerful races at that time jointly created Dream of Chaos, and then handed it over to the Nightmare Demon to manage. The Nightmare Demon was one of the most peculiar races in Shia. It was also the only race that could resist the savior other than the ancient King Selection race. This was because the Nightmare Demon was real at night and illusory during the day. In other words, any effect that was not their own would be reset after half a day. The high-level Nightmare Demon could hold on for half a day. When the sun rose, the depravity and madness would be eliminated. And as the Nightmare Demon's instinct allowed them to freely control the Dream of Chaos. And it turned out that the alliance of the three races and the Nightmare Demon had succeeded. Under the control of the Dream of Chaos, the savior fell into an extremely long sleep. However, just like how bricks would turn into sand, with the passage of time and the change of era, the ancient races gradually withered. The Dream of Chaos, that had lost its effect, was also lost. But when time flowed to the human era, the savior had already ended his hibernation. Then, a huge disaster like history repeated itself, until the emergence of the Society of Sages in the Second Age. At the critical moment, the Arde family, the only family that still had a legacy, led the survivors of the various races to find the Dream of Chaos. But for that, they paid a great price. The first president of the Society of Sages, Lucen Arde, died because of it. The first generation of the Society of Sages was almost wiped out. However, when the family was at its weakest, the Arde family was hunted down by the believers of the Savior because of the Dream of Chaos. Chapter 3:11. In the empty hall, the black-haired woman forced herself to cheer up after recounting the sorrowful past of the Akkad family. Luo Ya also tried his best to wipe away the bitterness on his face. However, at the next moment, the young man's face froze when he saw the room that Estrid pointed at. What does she mean? Keep a child? Keep what child? Luo Ya stared blankly at the woman in front of him with his eyes wide open. He couldn't react for a moment, but Estrid didn't feel that there was anything wrong with it. For a family with a long history like the Arde family, what they feared the most was the loss of their inheritance. What did inheritance require? Of course, it was the descendants. No matter how wonderful the inheritance method was, no matter how profound and powerful the inheritance power was, it was useless without descendants. Since ancient times, rare races and outstanding bloodlines had to ensure the survival of their descendants before going to the battlefield. This was the responsibility and obligation of the race and the family, especially for a family with a small population like the Akkad family. Although Estrid would try her best to avoid it, if there was no other choice, Luo Ya might perish together with Prist. At such a time, it was natural for him to keep a seed for the family. Ancestor, what are you talking about? Lillian is mine. I've asked the child. You have the same bloodline, but you're not related by blood. We're not related by blood, but when it comes to children, I don't have that kind of relationship with Senior. Luo Ya, who almost understood the situation, tried to evade the question with a stiff face. Estrid was stunned. The black-haired woman looked at the young man and blinked. She didn't expect that the two of them weren't lovers. In fact, Estrid always thought that the two of them called each other brother and sister because they liked each other, but it wasn't a big deal. Don't worry, there's nothing wrong with your relationship. It's much better than the soldiers on the front line during the war. Luo Ya and Lillian were willing to sacrifice themselves to save each other. Their feelings for each other were far beyond that of ordinary couples. In her opinion, it was enough. During the war, the two parties in the front line might not have met each other before. Estrid looked at the blushing Luo Ya. She had already guessed the situation of the teenager, but as an old virgin, Estrid had no experience to impart. She could only pat him on the shoulder and said, "Your Akkat family is the main branch of Ardur's family, so you must leave behind a descendant. But you don't have to be nervous, just tell her the truth. That child will agree." The truth? How should he tell the truth? "Senior sister, can you help me give birth to a child?" There's no way anyone would agree to this. Wait, if it's senior sister, perhaps. Hearing Estrid's words, Luoya suddenly panicked when she recalled the girl's love and care. Lillian might really agree, but the problem was that he didn't really want to die. Normally, there would not be an absolute deadlock in a historical episode. Luoya wanted to fight for his life, but he didn't want to die. And he found it strange. From Roy to Estrid, why did they all have something against Lillian's belly? Luoya had a headache when he thought of this, but then he recalled Estrid's attitude toward the Ackman family. His feverish brain seemed to have been splashed with cold water. He deliberated for a moment and carefully said, Ancestor, there's something I want to tell you. Actually, senior sister Lillian is a member of the Ackman family. Hearing Luoya's words, Estrid, who hated the Ackman family to the core, frowned. But after a long silence, the black-haired woman sighed. 1,000 years have passed, and the grudges of the past have long been buried in the dust of history. These have nothing to do with that child. Compared to that, her love and care for you is real. Not many people in this world dare to stand in front of the Lord of Curses, let alone for others. Besides, if your child is born, what will his surname be? That should be Akkat. Roha listened to this question with a strange look on his face. Estrid nodded her head seriously. That's it. You're Akkat. After marrying you, she changed her surname to Akkat. The child will still be Akkat. What does that have to do with the Ackman family? How can that be? Chapter 312. Outside the door, Estrid prayed for the prosperity of her children and grandchildren. On the other side of the door, the black-haired young man held the bottle in his hand and didn't know what to do. After struggling for a long time, the young man braced himself and walked into the room. The room Lillian was in was similar to Luoya's room. It should be a temporary ward as there weren't any personal belongings in the room. The young man glanced at the clock on the wall and found that it was stopped just like the room he woke up in. Only the dream spirits were flying around in the room. "Senior?" Luoya called out softly but didn't get any response. He heaved a sigh of relief when he realized Lillian didn't seem to wake up. He strode into the room and the first thing he saw was the young lady sleeping on the bed. Her black hair was scattered, her delicate face was slightly pale due to blood loss, and her lips were lighter than usual. Her neck was snowy white, and her chest was moving up and down slightly. Lillian's temperament was completely different from usual. Just like that, Luoya was presented before him. The moment he saw Lillian sleeping soundly on the bed like a sleeping beauty, an unprecedented sense of peace rose in his heart. But at the same time, it made his throat hoarse and his eyes sour. Standing at the door and calming his emotions, Luoya slowly approached the bed. After thinking for a moment, he moved a chair and sat beside the bed like that night. But this time, he didn't dare to simply hold Lillian's hand. Looking at the small, jade-like hand, the image of Lillian breaking it to summon 10 cities, flashed across the black-haired young man's mind. Even though Estrid had healed her, Luoya still observed her hand for a long time. Gently covering Lillian's jade-like hand with both of his hands, Luoya let out a relieved sigh. However, what he didn't expect was that the sleeping young lady seemed to have sensed something and slowly opened her eyes. Luoya sobbed as he felt the warmth of the young lady's body and breathed in her faint fragrance. The black-haired young lady gently stroked the young man's head, but she was also crying tears of joy. After encountering the source-grade priest, although the two of them were covered in wounds, they had survived. This kind of ending could be described as a miracle. Luoya was very satisfied with this, and Lillian felt that this was the happiest moment in her life. The intense emotions caused their blood to resonate. Their bodies were pressed together as if they were one. Roja silently listened to the girl's heartbeat. He felt that it was the most pleasant sound in the world. The youth enjoyed this feeling and apologized to Estrid in his heart. Luo Ye's arrangements were undoubtedly perfect. The timing of Lillian's awakening was accurate and the potion to ensure success was prepared. But it was a pity that Luo Ye didn't have the desire to do so. After surviving a calamity, the love in their hearts was far greater than before. But it was also because of this that procreation seemed somewhat vulgar and inappropriate. When love filled one's heart, desire had to be put aside. Luo Ye finally understood why most people would choose to hug at this moment. It was because it could bring two hearts closer together. After hugging for a long time, Luo Ye's breathing gradually stabilized and Lillian's emotions calmed down. The black-haired young lady stroked the young man and broke the silence first. If we can go back, let's go out and live together for a while. Huh? The sudden request and topic made Roja slightly surprised. The boy looked up at the girl in front of him and blinked with some puzzlement. Senior sister, going out and living together means, if we live together, we won't be separated for a day. Luo Ye widened his eyes when he heard Lillian's answer. He immediately understood what the young lady meant and nodded almost reflexively. Before this incident, it was Lillian who felt uneasy about being separated from Luo Ye. But after meeting Priest and Lillian sacrificed herself to send him away, it was Luo Ye who felt uneasy and even traumatized. This time, senior sister, you'll have to keep your word. Of course. I can't bear to break my promise a second time. Lillian smiled as she said this. Luo Ye also smiled. After hugging for a while, the young lady finally had the energy to observe her surroundings. Not long after, her gaze naturally focused on one spot. Is that medicine for me? Medicine? The black-haired young man was stunned when he heard Lillian's words. He turned around and saw that the young lady was holding a medicine bottle in her hand. His eyes instantly widened. Wait. Senior sister, you can't drink that. That's for pregnancy, cough, cough. For what? No, I mean. Chapter 313. The alluring aroma of tea lingered around his nose and the soft seat made him unwilling to get up. When Luo Ye opened his eyes again, he saw a dazzling array of refreshments and a witch holding a teacup across the table. However, unlike the previous two times, Altacia was much more obedient this time. She didn't tempt Luo Ye to do anything, nor did she make him appear in a strange place. She just greeted him with a faint smile in front of the peaceful tea table. Good evening, Sir Hero. Good evening. Looking at the night outside the window, Roja calmly greeted back and then picked up the cup and took a sip of tea. This was the third time they met. Luo Ye's emotions were very stable. After experiencing various crises, the more urgent the situation was, the calmer the young man became. However, it was this unusual calmness that made the witch across the table puzzled. Altacia looked at the calm young man. After hesitating for a moment, she raised her eyes and carefully said, "What a surprise, I thought I would be scolded when I saw you this time." Why? Because, the skill I gave you didn't take effect. Aren't you angry? Angry? Hearing Altacia's words, the black-haired young man paused for a moment and nodded slightly. Yes, but only to myself. Yourself? Why? Looking at Altacia, who widened her eyes, Luo Ye put down the teacup and said calmly, "You are a witch. You are the representative of changes and incomprehensible. Treating the skill you gave me as a life-saving straw is absurd. Moreover, that skill isn't an autonomous ability but similar to a summoning. Therefore, the summoned person expressing rejection is also one of the possible outcomes. After all, that is your right. In the end, you have never said that you are my companion." Luoya raised his eyes and looked coldly at the white-haired witch. Seeing this, Altacia pursed her lips and showed a wronged expression. Sir Hero, are you treating me as an enemy? No, it's not hostility. It's just distrust. Or rather, jumping out of a fixed way of thinking. I was indeed too lazy before. The black-haired youth sighed as he recalled Prister's evaluation of him. After experiencing the crisis of the two historical fragments, although Luoya still believed that the danger of the historical fragments should be taken seriously, in fact, he had unknowingly started to look down on them, which was the arrogance in Pulist's eyes. It was inevitable that he would encounter ancient existences in the historical fragments, but would these ancient gods help him? No one could guarantee such a thing. This was especially true for the Witch Queen, Altacia. She wasn't a match for Luoya in the first place. Plus, witches were known to be capricious, so it was only natural that something would happen at such a special moment. Ever since I resonated with Senior Lillian and learned that she also had the bloodline of the Ackett family, I developed a sense of dependence on her and lost my sense of nervousness. I subconsciously wanted to share my burdens with her, which resulted in Senior Lillian almost dying to save me. You didn't appear at that time, which could be said to have shattered the illusion in my heart and allowed me to regain my footing. From this perspective, I should be thanking you. Luoya gazed at the white-haired woman in front of him. His golden pupils didn't contain any deceit. Upon hearing his words, Altacia was stunned. After a long while, the Witch Queen's body gradually trembled. Then, she couldn't help but laugh out loud. Hee hee. Ha ha ha. As expected, we really get along well. Sir Hero, you're right. A sense of dependence is indeed a contradiction with the trials of your family. But I didn't do it on purpose. That's the only thing I hope you can understand me about. Altacia isn't such a bad witch. I didn't appear because summoning me in your state back then wouldn't solve the problem. Instead, it would cause your deaths. The white-haired Witch Queen stroked her cheeks and gazed at the young man opposite her with narrowed eyes. I really like Sir Hero. That's the only thing I hope you don't doubt. Like? Are you referring to the pain and lamentation when I'm at the center of the contradiction? Don't ask that. Isn't it like you're asking me to tell you what I like about Sir Hero? You're so mean. Altacia held her cheeks and said shyly. But at the next moment, she revealed a joyful smile. Although I like those two, I still hope that Sir Hero can defeat them. After all, isn't that the contradiction in your family? No matter if it's the inner conflict and hesitation, or the external conflicts and dangers, they are like curses that will always accompany you. And Sir Hero is a typical example. You're tuning into the Blissful Bookshelf YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.